So we are going to go directly to thrift shop remodel and expansion pre-design. Glenn Becker, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. You might recall at your mini planning session, we had a pretty good detailed discussion about the original pre-design for a thrift shop expansion and remodel, and we got a lot of good comments from the council. And over the last few weeks, we haven't tried to incorporate those into a new pre-design, a revised pre-design. And the most significant thing, as your agenda bill explained, is the project's been scaled down, including a new cost estimate of about $1.5 million, and a reduced scale's been reduced of the addition itself to the building. So with that, I'll introduce C. Sullivan, our architect on the project, so we can sort of get into the meat of things.
Great. Thank you. So we heard what you said last time. How do I do this? Am I smart enough to push the button? Or is it that one?
Up the project? Where is it in it?
1, 2. Or is it that way or which way?
But then what does he aim it at, do you know?
Wait a minute.
I don't, I apologize.
Oh, I made it work over there. I'm sorry. Little technology glitch. Oh, there you go. Look at that. There you go. All right. So, as you recall, we IT multifunctional. And so this was from the original pre-design. As you recall, we were actually proposing an addition that is, in essence, a freestanding building to the east of the existing building that would house all the various uses of sorting and an admin and a new lunch area. And then we also had included in this project at least a restroom that would be associated with the park. So that was what we had originally. And so what we understood, we scaled the project back down to this $1.5 million target budget. And the way we did that is we went back and looked at the scope, worked with Suzanne at the thrift shop here, and decided that what it really called for was just a small addition. It's about 2,000 square foot addition to the 8,000 square foot existing footprint. The work in the existing thrift shop would be basically renovating spaces that were back of house that were part of the sorting into retail space. So fairly minimal amount of work there. And then this 2,000 square foot addition would again house the sorting, some storage, and 2 admin offices. The biggest thing we did, you can go ahead and flip here and I'll show you a little more. Oh, I'll do this. We also are proposing, at least right now, we've increased the parking count. As you recall, we were reorganizing the parking lot to get about, from the original, I think there's about 39 stalls out there now, we're going to about 55 stalls. By adding one more row of parking and...
I'm going to ask you to pause for a second.
You bet.
Is your audio working okay?
It is, it's on.
And you're picking up what he's...
Am I loud enough?
Okay, good.
I can yodel.
Sorry.
That's all right. Sure. Just by adding one more row of parking, we didn't have to add an aisle because the aisle was already there, was slightly inefficient, the 55 stalls. So by adding another row, we got another 15 stalls. So proposing at about 70 stalls total, almost, in essence, about doubling of the capacity of the existing lot. And so that's what we're proposing with that site plan. The other issue then on the site plan is because now rather than a freestanding building off to the east, it's more just an addition that has that's to the east there. We've moved and reduced down the size of the drop-off driveway that's to the east there. So we're still proposing to separate the drop-off from the entry of the building, but we've reduced its scale. We heard a little bit, we were taking a lot of park space up, so we reduced it down. We've left it about the same 60-foot diameter radius, and the reason for that size is there's a couple trucks that have to come in a couple times a week to take the trash and the bulk away. I'm going to feedback a little bit. How's that? And so we do need that turnaround capacity. It also allows us then to stack about 4 or 5 cars off the street as they're waiting to donate. So we don't want to have the donations go out into the street there. So that's the changes in the site plan. Go ahead and flip to the next and I'll show you. So the floor plan again is, for the most part, the blue is the existing building that we're converting over to retail. The right side is the first floor, and then the left side is the second. On the first floor, then, the purple boxes over there are really the addition, and that's the sorting area. So the round drop-off drive, and then under an awning would be the trash and recycling, and that'd be where they'd be bringing in the drop-off material, and then doing the sorting, and then it would move right into the building there. And we're going to do very minimal amount of remodel, as I said, in the existing building. We're going to leave the toilet rooms as they are. We originally proposed to completely reorganize and put new toilet cores, so that saves some money. On the second floor, for the addition, we've got a large storage area because they're lacking storage right now, and it also acts as surge space and other uses, I think, in the future. And then the two green offices there. And then most of the second floor will be given over to retail, except we're going to leave the lunchroom as it is right now, and the lunchroom would stay at the volunteer lunchroom, thank you. And the toilets back in that corner would be left as they are. So again, we're reducing the amount of work we're doing in the existing building. The bottom line there is the two sections on the left is the existing thrift shop section, and as you recall, or if you've been, I'm sure you've been there, there's a deeply shed roof. We are still proposing to raise that portion of the shed roof up, and then the addition gets sort of nested into it along the side, and it works a couple ways. We're going to increase again the square footage of the second floor just by doing that move, and also for us it integrated the form of the addition into the building, and it became a little more, the continuity between the two became a little bit better in that regard. And I'll go with one more to the next here. So that's the view as it is now, the existing. We can go one more here through the magic of electronics here. So that's the long shed roof that you can see in the gray up in the upper left-hand side there. That is the addition, but then it continues over the top of part of the new, or part of the old, sorry. And then you can see the awning that comes out and covers up the donation, recycling and trash area, and then the drive. It's a circle drive. We attempted to do a little photo montage down at the lower right there. That's kind of what you'll see through the trees. You don't see much, but it gives you an idea. We're trying to keep in mind the form of the building as it is now and try to integrate it as much as possible. It does stay fairly hidden, and my landscape architect reminded me that we're actually adding some additional foliage on that side, so you wouldn't even see that much, but that gives you an idea of it's still low massing, and probably stick with similar coloration as well. I think that's all I have on that, and go one more. So then the accounting of it all. So we're putting about $50 a square foot into the existing building, the existing 8,000 square feet, and that would include minor renovation, better electrical and mechanical system. That's really the bulk of that, as well as a fire sprinkler system, and it also includes a new roof for the old building. It's time to go. And then you can see the 2,000 square foot addition there at about a little over $500,000 construction costs. And so when you total that up, including the site work and such, it's about $1.5 million for this renovation. And then between ourselves, landscape and civil, we came up with about $250,000 total project cost for the parking lot improvements, and that includes about $160,000 or $170,000 construction and the rest in soft costs. So you can see it's about a $1.8 million total if you went with the parking lot addition to it. That, in a nutshell, is pretty much it.
And just a reminder for the council that the parking changes we would anticipate coming from a different source. It wouldn't be part of the beautification fund. Yeah.
So I think that's all I've got. We can open the questions here. Well, discussion.
First, a comment. I think you misunderstood us because we wanted you to cut the cost dramatically, but keep everything. That's the way it always is, I'm sure. This looks good. So let's go to council member questions. Jane, your picture. Let's go a little freeform here,
Okay.
since we're all still eating and all.
A couple of questions. Could you walk me through the abbreviations that are on the map? Like,
Oh, sure. Yeah, they
I'm
get
sure
it.
it's sorting. I got some of them.
Right.
Furniture, retail.
Right,
that's
so
organization.
the Rs are all the retail spaces. Flip back there you go. Go around the horn there. So there's ENT as entry. We had an idea what entry, we'd have a little bit of history and interpretive design there that would kind of tell about the staff and what they do there. And then there's remodel for, now I'll forget a few of them, books, media is empty, housewares, furniture is the lower left, or sort of the lower portion of the right there. Jewelry is in the back there, RJW. These are all just our own ways to keep track.
Sure, okay.
Art up there, and then the sorting. And then upstairs, it's the offices there. The two green ones are offices, operations, and management. There is actually another green office that got missed, and I'll fall in the eye for that one. I missed it. Up front, there's a frontline office that's in the top corner of the first floor, which is basically support of the cashiers and such. And that's that. And then any other one you need explanation of? Yeah, they get a little.
And what material do you envision for the wall separating the drop-off point from the play area? Or is that
landscape would like to see a concrete wall or a segmented concrete block wall. We did talk about doing a concrete wall that could also become maybe a horizontal climbing structure. The actual play equipment wouldn't be in the budget, but that is an option. We thought we'd make it tall enough so it really visually separates the cars standing and such. I think in the site plan, we were basically screening it with landscape, but I could imagine expanding the play area out that would utilize that vertical surface for either artwork or a climbing structure. Climbing structure in playgrounds are kind of a big deal now, especially because it would just be a horizontal where you only get off the ground 18 inches and sort of spider along. So that's the question.
And there's mechanical room and then mechanical exterior.
Yeah, right now we're proposing a modular mechanical system that basically would have an exterior cooling tower. It's about 4 foot by 6 foot by about 7 foot tall. And then each room has these what they call cassettes that go on the wall that provides cooling and heating, and you can expand it incrementally as the rooms grow or change. So that's what that little corner is about. We would have the mechanical room and obviously have other things in it, electrical panels and hot water tank.
One thing I'm sorry to see that's not included anymore are the exterior bathrooms that could be used by the play area. Is there room in there literally to add something like that later if you wanted to? Or
and I think
budget perhaps?
Yeah, I think if the budget was found for that, certainly whether it's attached to the building, I think from our landscape architect's opinion, maybe it was almost a little bit too far away from the circulation of the park. It maybe wants to be up over to the west of the playground, so that as you come around the park, there's a more connection to it. Where we had it before, you had to kind of go up and around and through the play area to get to it. So I think she's feeling that probably you could find a better site for it. But it wouldn't be bad to put it on the north end of the building. We could probably find a good way to get circulation to it. But again, it was kind of out of our budget right now. As I recall, and I'll probably misspeak about it, I want to say it was in the $200,000, $210,000 range for restrooms, and those were kind of the standard city-style stainless steel fixtures and the block walls and such, a little more hardened, so it was a little more expensive to build those. So that's that.
Okay, that's it.
Following up on that, is there, I'm a huge fan of this project, but I think there's such an opportunity to do the bathrooms there, and that maybe we were talking about all these creative funding things with beautification and with this and with that. And this just seems like a right for parks money to be used for the bathrooms. And I'm just wondering if that, with the Burbank money that kind of some of the fundraising and MIPA as an offset, if that could be applied here for these bathrooms, and maybe even if it's just one instead of two, if it's 100,000 versus 200,000, you know, again, being now construction city council member, I'm proposing, but I really think it'd be so valuable, and you know, I'm sure the thrift shop folks can speak to it more than how many people come in to thrift shop just to use the bathroom, and just to make that.
Of course, that's part of your marketing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. We actually like the customers coming in our store and we welcome them, so.
But of course, off hours, right?
We're going to put the toy section right next to the bathroom.
Well, maybe then even just doubling it inside, but it seems like it's an opportunity.
Tanya, excuse me, could I get you to move your mic a little bit closer to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't a matter of moving, it was a matter of turning it on. Mike?
Okay, great, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of questions. I see you don't have the water retention annotated on this schematic.
Right, so the way we did the budget is we're going to use the in lieu of.
Fee in lieu.
Yeah, the payment in lieu of. So in this area, we can pay a fee to the city, in essence, for detention, retention, rather than building it on site. It's an opportunity. So we didn't include the cost of the retention on the site. We're just paying the fee, which is prescribed in the.
How much does that cost?
I think we've got about $12,000 is what we've got. That's the sort of high end of the chart there.
Okay, interesting. 70 stalls, why 70 stalls? Was that driven just from the
Geometry.
Okay.
Yeah.
The radius, I'm concerned about that, the drop-off point. I mean, it just, I didn't get any rulers out or protractors out, but that looks tough to make that turnaround for the garbage truck, right?
Yeah.
For the garbage truck with the, what is that, 20-yard or 40-yard container?
It's a 20-yard, yeah.
That looks tough enough to drop that.
Yeah,
It just looks impossible to make that right-hand turn onto 78.
Could be. Now, that's something we didn't explore. Maybe that's going to take a little bit of exploration, how, in fact, that apron wants to work out, especially with the median there.
It's a big
And as you can
deal.
see, we originally designed it so that the connection of the drive happened at the break there, and now it's not. I guess we'll have to explore whether we want to make a break so people can turn left off of that street or not. The 60-foot is based around both the truck that has to do that and also fire access, which in this case we really don't have to have it, but that's the turning radius of a fire truck as well, so it provides that geometry for both.
Part of the reason the drop-off was reconfigured, that was a specific concern of Councilmember Grouse's. He thought it just looked like too much asphalt, and it would disturb too many trees.
Well, I mean, I agree with Councilmember Grouse on that, but nevertheless, you can't give us a plan that doesn't work, and if you're telling me that you don't have a 60-foot radius on the 78th Southeast, you're giving us a plan that doesn't work.
Well, it's just pre-designed at this point, yeah.
So you're right, we'll have to work on that apron there.
About the trash can, so you've got the 40-yard container there, which is what you all, and you've got the dumpster.
Yeah.
The dumpster. Is that what the smaller?
The smaller one is the recycling bin. Am I got that back right? Sorry.
Does it get any better?
No, that's the best of the event. The smaller one's the trash. No, sorry. The big one's the trash. The small one's the recycling. So that's what they have right now. So we're just
And those are under
an awning. Yeah.
Then how does the truck get it if it's under the awning?
They just they drag it up and then onto their truck. So they don't have to actually bring the truck to under the awning. They just come up to the back of the awning and then they hook it up and it drags up onto the back.
It's a front-end lift, so forks go in, pull it out, dump it up.
Okay, but then
the trash, the recycling, they would actually drag out and do the forklift.
Yeah.
The larger one, they actually back the truck up and there's a chain that goes on a hook and it's got wheels in the back and then they drag it up on. So it doesn't have to go under the awning.
And I'll assume that you're looking at overhead clearance and whatnot for that.
Yeah.
How do you get the recycle dumpster back to it?
The person would actually pull it out. That one we've got because the person can get out of the truck basically and drag it to the front so they can get their focus on it.
Okay. Restroom, I'm also concerned about restroom. I can't see spending, unlike Councilmember Sim, I'm not as excited about this project on a financial level. But restrooms, I get really unexcited about it from a design level too. Windows are the renovation of the existing structure. Are the windows being replaced?
No, we didn't budget that way.
So those are old windows, I'm assuming?
No, for the most part, they were renovated in the 2000 renovation that happened. So most of the exterior were added on, the envelope was added on, and those are new windows.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Insulation, I guess, is okay then, we're saying?
Right. For
The 2000 renovation, did that include an upgrade in insulation?
It did. Just with the roof was renovated, and the whole roof was renovated with new insulation, and then the walls that were built new were all insulated to the capacity of to the requirement of the energy code, which has obviously changed, but as long as we're not doing substantial alteration, tearing apart walls and such, we would need to upgrade those walls. They would be what they are.
And the present plan then, on this 1.8 total is fire protection?
It is included in there for both the new and the old. Right.
That's all I have, Mr. Mayor, on the structure. I have some financial concerns about it.
Okay, let's continue with this. Debbie, you're up, and then go back to Tana. We'll come to Chip, I guess, after we do these sort of design questions. If you're okay with that, Chip?
Just say yes.
You just say yes.
One other question, so
You got to do a microphone check yourself.
So the addition proposed is 2,000 square feet?
It's about yes,
Okay.
2 stories. So
Is
it's
that-
1,000 square foot footprint.
Does that come back with an equivalent additional 2,000 square feet in retail space?
Pretty darn close, actually, because I believe, from my recollection of the existing, we're around a little less than 6,000 square foot of retail in an 8,000 square foot building, and so we're adding on 2,000 and getting approximately 2,000 more square foot of retail.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the ratio is close enough to 1-to-1?
It is,
Just
yeah.
wanted to make sure that, that we were keeping it at
Oh, yeah, good point.
revenue generating
Sure, right,
square footage
right.
as opposed to potential overhead square
Right.
footage, which
Right.
you have to have a little bit of both, I'm sure.
Sure.
Okay. The other question pertains a little more clarification regarding the parking.
Mm-hmm.
When you noted, I think, 229,000 roughly
Mm-hmm.
for the parking, is that just in the parking lot, or is that also including the drop-off?
No, the drop-off is included in the budget of the building. Yeah, we did that particularly. And we did price out for the drop-off drive a pervious pavement system, which is more expensive, obviously, but we did it just because it's a good and green thing to do.
Okay.
But the $250,000 is just the parking lot area.
It's just that net new 35.
Yeah. Yeah, in essence,
Parking places.
30, whatever it comes out to be, 34, 35 stalls, yeah.
Okay, cool. The next question was, I think, something that came up via Mike, and that is additional costs that the city might incur in terms of 78th. Looking at that, and I'm green, I'm thinking there's a lot of people who are going to want to drop off and then turn north, coming back out.
Right.
And I think it would be important for us to be able to identify what any of the upgrade or update costs would be on 78th, because I know otherwise, they're going to have to come out, turn right, they're going to come down into that neighborhood, and they're going to do a U-turn in the middle of the street because it's a nice wide street. And I think that could create a little bit of stress on traffic points and neighbors, other places, especially with so many kids around.
That's a good point.
So I think I'd want to know what it would take to make sure that just traffic in that general area wasn't losing its mobility. And then the next one, of course, I have an opinion about the bathrooms too, and I think they are important. I think they're incredibly important. One of the inadequate facilities at that end of the park in particular. Clearly, there's bathrooms at the other end. But I think we all know when you've got a young child and there's urgency involved, you don't have time to run across what is often not well-drained field as well. So I would like to see us even if it is a matter of doubling or tripling the facilities inside the thrift store, outside the thrift store, what's an economical way to make that more accessible to the people who are using the park, and of course on a 7-by-24 basis, because we also don't want to be completely limited by the hours of the thrift store as well. And as a minor point, I would certainly want to see some sort of baby changing facilities there, because that doesn't exist, and that's another, I know, sort of, it's not a problem, but it's a constant point for people who are using that park, with young kids in particular. So I'm going to support some creative financials that might help us increase capacity, again, with the 7-by-24 access.
So with my microphone on, so I'm looking at the parking lot, and it looks like the entrance, the one that used to be near the thrift shop, has been eliminated, and there's just that one.
It's not, actually, it's under a tree.
Oh,
It's
okay.
kind of a graphic thing. That's right there. It is actually right there. That tree just graphically overhangs a little bit.
Okay.
It kind of does look...
Well, interestingly, so what if it were eliminated, I guess? Because I was thinking, that was actually a really smart thing to do, because you're probably adding some green space and some separation to the, well, you're adding more parking, and you're probably actually creating a traffic flow so that does move up the block and out of the intersection area, and maybe a little bit out of the neighborhood concern, and then you could probably get another parking space or two. So I was going to ask you questions about that and what your thoughts were, but...
Never mind.
Well, no, yeah, what do you think about creating that?
Yeah, right. Possibly, I guess we'd have to rethink about how right now the diagonal parking for the thrift store works off of that.
Right.
That drive and how...
And probably for safety, you need an in and out. But
It is kind of handy to allow people kind of come in and out and circulate out. It also, by putting the entry to it would move the traffic even further into the neighborhood, good or bad, I don't know. Somehow it's kind of nice that you enter right there. Interesting thought. The other thought I just had as you were saying that is, should you enter the middle so we get the traffic kind of off the front door a little bit, as people would make it go either left or right, or maybe think about a different circulation pattern. So maybe there is an alternative there.
and kind of thinking about the pedestrian flow.
That's what I was thinking.
So, because as people are walking, you walk from the playground, and then you actually walk through parking lot to get to the front door of the thrift shop. There's no kind of safe, direct path. There's no entry, welcome here.
Yeah, trying to create a connection there possibly be better suited so people can walk in front from the street, could walk along the thrift store and actually then get into the park system. We left this walkway, shaky hand here, we left this walkway as part of it. We had to move it over to get the increased capacity, but there is a connection to the neighborhood there. But yeah, maybe there is another way to
so just that, I think that'd be great just to look at that in particular, the kind of what's the welcoming and what's the pedestrian passageway. And then kind of channeling what I know Mike Grady would be asking would be about pervious and impervious services. And if you can kind of speak to what does the parking lot have there. I see there's one green strip, but the rest is pretty much...
That's our little gesture. Yeah, we could consider doing, and I talked with Civil about this, the soils aren't really, at least from what we know about the soils, aren't really amenable exactly to the infiltration system, but my thought was, or our thought was, that it is possible we could drain it all to a strip down the middle and filter it, biofiltration system through the middle. It was just a little gesture and a pre-design to that effect. That, we did price that whole parking lot out as impervious. It's just normal asphalt overlay. And then the gray area over there is the turnaround we did say was impervious, or pervious, I should say. And we just, I think it's for us just holding some money to do something the right way, and we'll find the best place to spend it. I don't know, I'd have to look at the detail of what it would cost to do pervious on the main lot there. It would obviously add some cost, but we could look at that. We did, by increasing the parking lot towards the north, there is that funny swale right now, which quite frankly no one's sure exactly, other than it takes the water coming off the hillside. We'll have to deal with that in some way, but it did bridge over that, if you will, so we no longer have that funny moat effect of the park. That's right. Keep people out.
Okay. All right. let's see, I had a couple questions myself. One, and this is really kind of down in the weeds, but so I'm looking at the drop-off area in your oblique shot. You showed wall, I think, all the way around it. It seemed like a sort of an odd prison entrance wall to things there. I was curious. I understand the need for a wall to the playground.
Right.
I was unclear on what you were thinking with regards to putting one all the way around.
I'd say it's more of a modeling thing. We're dealing with grade a little bit along there, but we're going to be going down into grade. There'll be a little bit of a raised curve there, but it won't be as much as we're showing in the rendering. Quite frankly, it got to get a little overstated in the rendering. But so wasn't planning on wall on that side, just a curve that provides some retaining.
Okay.
Because we do have a little. From the entry drive down to the level of the thrift shop, we're probably 30 inches, and so we'll have to do a little bit of mitigation there. But so you'll have a little bit of retaining along that edge, but it's not going to be a wall per se.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah.
I was going to say, it did cross my mind earlier, if you put a wall near a playground, kids will be on top of it. And, the concern is obviously the height, the safety of falling into the car zone. So, while on one side you can have the climbing capability, it also creates the laddering capability to get up above. So I want us to be extra diligent in terms of the design of any
Easily solved with the spools of razor.
That's going to be winning.
So that wasn't clear to me. What's the elevation on the playground side from the surface?
The height of it?
Right.
I don't know if we've really studied it fully. I'll say at the maximum, it may be 6 feet where it drops off. We're just trying to hide cars, basically, is what we're planning.
Well, I guess where I'm going, you're kind of at catch-22. It's going to have to be 4 or 5 feet, right, so that the kids don't fall into the parking lot. So, and then once that starts getting higher, you start, from the perspective of the parking lot, you start getting a great big concrete wall. So that would be good for the council to know, I understand.
At Luther Burbank, if you think of the playground there next to the tennis courts, the wall is much, much lower, and there's a cyclone fence sitting on top of it, and that you can hide cars with the wall, and you can also keep kids from trying to climb the thing by maybe some other means, simple means, but it hasn't been a problem at Luther Burbank.
I would be interested in exploring that whole look and option. I'm sure it's probably additional cost, but I can even imagine a semi-artistic metal steel kind of, almost looks like bamboo type structure that separates it clearly, but is not this, prison wall.
Right.
And I would like to explore making that maybe a little more artistic and functional than...
That potentially could be something we would use our 1% for the arts money for.
Oh, there you go. So a screen wall, maybe using landscape that kind of augments it to visually screen, but soften it.
And I mean, a true barrier, but, again, using more kind of a steel artistic setup than just concrete.
Right.
Another question, and I think this is probably a non-starter, but it just was something that came to mind. Does it make any sense to have your drop-off a drive-through drop-off that brings you out into 34th rather than a drive-in, drive-out that same way?
There's quite a bit of grade change right there at that corner. I don't know if I could sneak around. It'd have to be a fairly quick jump up to get back up into 30th, because it does jump up there a little bit. Yeah, I think the geometry would probably be a little hard to do.
Okay.
You also may get a little too close to the corner with it.
It becomes tough to do a left turn. You're sort of putting yourself right into the intersection.
I know traffic likes to keep people, their entry and exit off streets a little further away from the intersections.
Regarding bathrooms, this is a bit of a comment, or it's sort of a question wrapped in a comment, but I'm out at Marymore fairly frequently for sports things, and I know that they have bathroom facilities there that are just unisex, so, sort of go in, it's essentially like a home bathroom, a bit oversized. When you said bathrooms would cost $2 $200,000. Is something like that an option to bring the cost down substantially?
Those were, what we costed out were 3-stall per sex toilet rooms, so they're fairly substantial. You could go with a single occupant toilet, maybe put 2 of them. They're unisex or family style. You get, obviously it'd be less because we're probably provide 2 fixtures instead of 6, and that is an option, certainly. And whether you do is a freestanding kiosk or we make it somehow part of the building, that would be an option, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think, you raised an interesting point of you think you have some benefit from having folks come into the thrift shop, and that I don't think that's to be taken lightly. But I would be curious at some point to hear from our Parks Department as to what their perception of need is out there, how often they're having, as Debbie points out, the panic that is coming after hours and leading to bushes. Leading to bushes.
I couldn't speak for Bruce necessarily on Mercerdale Park, but I think generically the Parks Department comes in every budget cycle and asks for a restroom somewhere in the park system. They believe they're needed, and we haven't always been successful seeking or getting the funding, but I think generally they think that could be helpful.
Well, there's certainly synergy in doing it now here if we're going to do it ever, because otherwise it's certainly a higher cost project done separately. So, those are the questions I had. Other questions, Tanya? You going?
I'm thrilled to hear that the $200,000 was for 6 stalls, because I had completely envisioned just, kind of that unisex to, one bathroom, and so it sounds like that could probably rapidly come down from the $200,000 to something a bit more.
We took a sort of, as we stood out there a lot and watching the playground, it got very filled, and we were thinking this needs to be a fairly substantial bathroom, especially being that it's the only one at this end of the park, and on a big festival and such, you'd hate to see 1 or 2 stalls, and it's, obviously you'd have lines out the doors and around the block. So that was our first blush at it, but certainly you could probably reduce it down to a couple stalls maybe.
Lines are better than bushes.
I guess so.
At some level.
Well, and especially if it were an ancillary to the bathrooms that are in the thrift store. So if there were a sign saying additional restrooms inside the thrift store when hours are open. And I'm wondering if something could be, that little corner just to the right of the thrift shop footprint and just above the addition. Is that it would be right next to the building. It could serve the playground and be right in there.
Right there, yeah. Again, it's all about just making sure we get good circulation paths so people aren't having to traipse through the swing set to get there. So,
You guys want to shift to questions for Chip? Financial questions here at this point? Don't go away.
I just want to comment on...
Stay where you are, and we'll sort of bounce back and forth.
The good job done in scaling back the project. It's really retained the essence of what the goals were, I think, aside from losing the bathrooms. But I think the spaces are wonderful, and it's very... adds more parking. It's very respectful of the neighborhood, and it's a good job scaling it down.
Debbie, you had a question for Chip, at least. Did others, too? Okay.
Let me go.
Yeah, but you'll need Chip's attention before you go there.
There may be a price increase going on right now.
Yes.
30% across the board.
All right, Mike.
Okay, thank you. I talked to Chip about this. I was not comfortable with the assumptions that were made, so I went through and made my own, what I call titled zero assumptions, for whatever it's worth. And when I went through my assumptions, which I thought were prudent assumptions, this thing just didn't pencil out at all. Matter of fact, we're losing quite a bit of money, and to lose money at the thrift store means that we're losing that money from Youth and Family Services, which will really affect folks in need out there. So, way I was assuming that there would be a $650,000 increase, which is what, 40% increase in 2015 whenever the project goes hot. I mean, that just doesn't seem realistic to me, nor did I see in any presentation the background on it. The budget also did not include a drop in revenue during the construction season, which I think would be a basic common sense assumption on your financials. I also had issue with assuming that expenses would only increase a straight line 4% when, and granted that history is not always a predictor of the future, but the thrift store shows an increase in expenses in the double digits from 2007 to 2012, in general about double digits. Also, something that we really need to be conscious about on this dais is you have two scenarios on this island. You have a toll scenario and a no-toll scenario. Now, as you all know, I'm going to go down to the mat on I-90 not getting tolled to pay for the Montlake extension. I-90 getting tolled, period. But we can't be blind that it might happen. It might happen. And if tolls happen with 30 to 40% of revenue coming from off-island folks, I mean, people aren't going to spend $6 or $12 to save $6 or $12, and if that's coming from 30 to 40% of your revenue, I mean, you have a completely different financial picture if we take that into consideration. So I think other than the restrooms and the 60-foot radius on the 78th, I think you've got a good design here, but I think it's the wrong time for this project. In addition to the monies that we're going to tap in to do this project, we're going to have a big expense fighting the I-90 tolls, and if we don't use this money that we've saved, if you will, for the inevitable bill for I-90, we're going to end up having to increase taxes, and we don't want to do that. So that's no question there, all statement. But if you want to take upon it, feel free to, Mr. Director.
Okay. Let's see. Let's start first of all, Councilmember Serio is referencing the financial forecast I handed out to the council at your mini planning session last month. All right. That was a very simple financial plan. That was like a pre-design version in my world. Okay. It wasn't complex. And in terms of, let's see, make sure I tick off these as we go through. In terms of the revenues, there was no ramp up in revenues because the assumption is that the construction that we would do would allow us to stay open. It was a deal breaker financially if we had to close or shut this place down. And so that was sort of the direction that was given, is let's do this so we can keep the thrift shop open. There may be a few times where we have to close it here and there, but basically keep it open. So that's why I had no ramp up of revenues, all right? I just assumed a significant increase. Was that too optimistic? Maybe. Maybe not. I personally was reasonably comfortable. Suzanne, who I have the highest regard for, is notoriously, this is not a criticism, this is a compliment, by the way, very conservative and great. She always beats her estimates. Awesome. I know that about her. And so, yes, I did take her revenue estimates that we had talked about as far back as last year and into early this year, and I bumped them a little bit. Not a lot, but I did bump them a little bit, okay?
On the expenditure side, yes, if you look at the long-term history, it isn't a straight 4% increase, but there's changes in staffing. We have staffed up over the years in the thrift shop. So I was assuming, okay, static staffing, okay, from 13 on. And a 4% average increase, I'm very comfortable with that. That should not be a problem. Now, what you should challenge is that staffing assumption. Is that realistic? When Suzanne and I had talked, again, back last year, and Cindy, we were reasonably comfortable with keeping staffing the same at that point in time. Did I tick them off real quickly? Okay. So, yeah, is there room to criticize the forecast? Absolutely. It is simple. But again, the idea was do the addition with minimal or no impact on existing operations. That was the key assumption. In terms of I-90, that was the thing I've mentioned, tolling. Based on my intel internally, I am optimistic that we're not going to have to worry about that. So I have the assumption that no tolling impact on the thrift shop. If there were tolls, there would be an impact, absolutely.
Yeah, and then we'll go to your financial questions as well. I mean, I realize we're out of time here, so that's away.
Yeah, I mean, one of the quick things is, challenge me if my recollection's wrong, it's not actually 30% of revenue, it's 30% of transactions. Because I think we actually discussed this when we went over it, and that is, we can count the number of transactions. We don't know what the value of the transactions is in terms of on versus off-island people. Now, I would also venture to guess that if you do come onto the island, you probably tend to spend more because you've made a concerted effort and concerted trip. So how that plays into I-90 tolling or the number of visitors, I think there's some good discussion to have. But I think that's an important distinction. So that was my clarifying question there. I've got just a couple other quick ones. The next one is, when we looked at the original estimates, it was based on, I want to say, it was more than 2,000 square feet. I would say close to 3,000 to 4,000 square foot addition.
It was about 4,800 square feet.
4,800 square feet, yeah. So when you were looking, essentially, if you're looking at your revenue per square foot, are we using the same revenue per square foot estimates for an additional 2,000 square feet as we were for 4,000 to 4,800?
No, I should clarify that we were adding that 4,000 plus 4,400.
Not all of it was retail.
No, it wasn't actually. It was all new lunchroom, offices, so it really didn't actually increase much of the retail. I guess we had a little bit upstairs where the lunchroom was.
Okay, because I think that's important. What we're saying is we're adding almost purely retail, which is revenue generating square footage, as opposed to some of the overhead, which I would think then would even show sort of an increase or efficiency in terms of our ability to pay back versus debt, because the revenue per added square foot is actually higher. And I bring this up because quite simply before I was to make a concrete decision based on the numbers you put here would be to look at a revised income statement
Forecast, yeah.
to make sure that we're all still in line with the 4%, what are the total costs, it's that in the timelines, because I also assume that there'd probably be a quicker time to market with this one than there might be with a more extensive remodel. So I'd want to see a new spreadsheet before I felt truly comfortable. And then the last one is, and I'm scared to bring it out, but I'm going to say it, and that is, there are some amazing bargains at the thrift store. Has the thrift store considered charging additional 25 cents per paperback or things like that, where we can see a little bit of, I raising prices at the thrift store, and I don't say that because I want to go gouge all these great people, who are there in search of treasures. But I know sometimes I walk away feeling a little bit guilty.
We like that. Would you like a response to that? Some of our thoughts?
Yeah, please.
It's something that we think about a lot. And we hear two sides. We hear, one, they're great bargains, and it's nice to hear that. We also hear you're bumping up against some lower-end department stores. And you'll see a lot of that on the internet, and there's a lot written about that right now, and that people feel like some of our prices are too high. We're trying to uniform our prices. We are now going through developing a philosophy of pricing, and we really want to be the thrift shopper's thrift shop. We want that to be the secondary part of our brand. The first part of our brand is that we're Mercer Island Thrift Shop. And we need to keep it like that because we want people to come back. And right now, because the economy is getting better, people can go other places and shop. And so we want them to continue thrift shopping. So that's always a moving target. We do think about that. We try to be prudent. We look at what other thrift shops are doing, and we stay up on that aspect of it. But we do take that into consideration.
I'm just really pleased to hear that you guys are doing some comparative analysis. I think that's absolutely fantastic. So thanks for clarifying that part of it. Well done.
Yeah, so what I'm going to suggest, and I assume you won't have problems, because we've got a relatively short agenda for the rest of the meeting this evening, let's go a bit longer here, because I don't think we've reached the point of giving very clear direction back to you yet. So I think it's important to get that. We've got the right cast of characters here to do that this evening, and so let's run, unless there's some objection from a parliamentary standpoint that I can't do it, let's keep going on this for a bit. All right?
Katie's waving as, I think maybe you need to stop at 7 o'clock, and do you need to,
what do we have to do?
You've already done roll call.
No, we haven't.
So you need to do roll call. You need to open the meeting at 7, the formal meeting, but then you can carry on your conversation from the study session.
Okay.
Exactly.
And just announce that you're going to do that.
What he said.
Right. Thank you, Rich.
Okay.
Glad I showed up.
We'll go 5 more minutes, and then we'll do that, and then we'll carry on a bit longer. So, Chip, to you.
Do you want us to take that? What we're hearing is great. Just remember, this is ballpark analysis stuff on the design level and financial side. And so what Councilman Bertland said is spot on from my perspective. To the extent that this looks about right from a design perspective, and I gave you some very high-level financial numbers back at your mini planning session, then I also gave you some debt numbers in your packet here, and that I'm comfortable with the debt numbers, okay, based on what would end up being a $1.6 million total project cost when you factor in financing costs, okay, to go out and secure debt. I'm comfortable with that, but I would be happy, it would make sense to go back and now let's refine the financial analysis and let's really pencil it out and see how it looks. And do the matching up with, we're talking about 2,000 new retail square feet, a better, more efficient use of our space. Is that really going to generate this additional revenue that we're projecting? That would be helpful, I think.
Yeah, and I might add that that's a piece of work that we could be doing as the agenda bill recommends. We go out and reach out to the neighborhood and see how they react to this pre-design.
So you propose a parallel process with some further refinement of the design and the financials at the same time that we're doing neighborhood public input?
Yes.
Because you wouldn't be authorizing this to do anything else. No more design, no construction. We think the next step is to talk to the neighbors, and then we can use that time to also do some more financials. And then the next time you would see it would be in light of all of that data, and you could give us the direction to go forward with design. And we then would have a project, but we don't have a project yet.
Just one more thing. Sorry, 1 second. From a debt perspective, debt still is really good in terms of interest rates, but they have come up. And so I'm a little, I'll just say, interested, a little slightly anxious that I'd rather not go out for debt next year. Rather, if you want to do it, I'd rather do it this year. That's all. And so from a timing perspective, that's kind of where my head is.
Tana, then Mike?
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. I think you included 3.4% as your interest rate or as your cost of financing.
That's got a cushion on it.
Yeah, I was going to say, that seems like you've been...
High.
Yeah.
Just a question in the city manager's sequence. I thought there were some significant issues we had with this design, which would require a relook and another meeting for this phase versus the next phase that you're implying.
It's totally your prerogative. I was just giving you what the staff's recommendation was.
I'm asking, kind of asking the question. I thought there was the restroom and the 78th Avenue turn seemed like significant issues there, which would require a second look at this level of design.
Some adjustments to the pre-design, I suppose we could do that. Sure. I mean,
not that I'm asking for it, but
Gene, Debbie, did you have other questions at this juncture?
I think I would just make a comment rather than question, and that is, in principle, I just want to be very cautious of the beautification fund and using a substantial amount of money from that, because there are notable projects here on the island, and I would not want to see us overly weighting whatever resources available to one particular area. So it's just a note, just a comment I would make at this point.
So I think we're to the point of any sort of wrap-up feedback, and I think it boils down to, is there anything that we didn't tackle of the small nature, and then of the big question of are we okay with going forward with what's been proposed, which is this idea of let's potentially drill down on some of these details, but let's move into a public comment period and financial drill down period now. So what I'm looking for is council comments or position on that.
Well, I like the plan. I think we should go ahead with it. I guess in view of Mr. Ciro's concerns about the turnaround area, perhaps we could get a sense of whether having to redo a curb cut or the median on 78th versus the expense of going back to the original plan, which was using the existing curb cut and adding more cement in there, or impervious or pervious surface. So if we could find out which of those options was least expensive, that would be helpful, I think. But in principle, I like the plan. I was telling Cindy a couple of weeks ago that I really like this plan because it is not a brand new spanking clean building, because there's something about the thrift shop which is a little bit funky, and I like the fact that this will retain some of that. It's very, and the addition will be in large part adding retail space, which is revenue generating space, and I think it'll be still also a wonderful place for volunteers to work. So I like it.
Okay, so let's pause for just a moment. I have to open the regular meeting, and so moving from study session nominally to regular meeting. Deb, can you do the roll call, and then we'll come right back to this completion of the study session.
Councilmember Debbie Berkeley.
Councilmember Debbie Bertman.
Here.
Councilmember Jane Braun.
Here.
Councilmember Mike Serro.
Here.
Councilmember Mike Grady. Councilmember Tana Sen.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Dan Grouse. And Mayor Bruce Bassett.
Here. Okay, thank you. For the watching public who might be just tuning in, we are in the midst of a study session on Agenda Bill 4860, Thrift Shop Remodel and Expansion Pre-Design. We're going to go just a little bit longer on that because still not quite wrapped it up, and because our agenda this evening is relatively short. So with that, we'll come back to Tana.
Yeah, I too am very excited about this project, and I know we've been talking about it for a few years back when I was on the foundation board, and with the entrepreneurial group, who I know will be very excited to see movement on this. We've had lots of discussions over the years about that. So this is very exciting, and I concur with Jane that on the spot and being able to utilize the existing building is exciting. From that kind of je ne sais quoi about the thrift shop and from an environmental point of view. So it is exciting. I don't think this needs to pause. I'd love to see it continue to go forward. I think seeing the curb cut options and the restroom options, I imagine might even be a good conversation piece with the neighborhood. They might really want bathrooms and see that as an advantage. And so I think I wouldn't want to see this get delayed, especially from the finance point of view.
Okay, Debbie, Mike, Debbie?
Yeah, I mean, I fully support it, and I, like to see it move forward sooner rather than later within, reasonable timeframes. To me, it is key that we reach out to that community because they are so impacted on a daily basis, particularly in the warm weather days with the amount of traffic and volume that comes through there. Tremendous sympathy for some of the inconveniences that they experience. Another key point that has been referenced here is very pleased to see that this square footage that's being added as revenue generating. Because keeping in mind, it's not just about having a big thrift store, it's about generating income for youth and family services, which goes right back into the community. Seniors, kids, elders, family, individuals, et cetera. And I think, keeping that mission and that objective in mind really does guide, to a certain extent, or a large extent even, where we go with the thrift store. And it's all about the ability to reinvest back here. So I'm excited about it. Please do get out there to the neighborhood. I'm happy to be involved in any way, shape, or form there. But I want to make sure that we're not only adding to the thrift store, but solving some of that neighborhood's inconveniences as well.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So I have a friend who's just finishing up his house, and it's a dream house that they've had. But their plan was to start their dream house 2 years earlier than they started it, because the situation just wasn't right with job and the economy and whatnot. I think that's where we are with this thrift shop. I think you've got a design. I appreciate preserving the original structure as much as you have. I think you've got some issues to work out that we've talked about, but it's just not the right time with it, especially with reference to two things. The financials, I'm uncomfortable that this will, in the end, make us more money, or certainly cover what I'm calling $1.8 million. And two, whether, if there's tolls, expanding the thrift shop is not the right thing to do. As far as engaging with the neighborhood, of course we need to engage with the neighborhood, but I don't know if this is a net gain for the neighborhood, because the assumption on the finances, let's just say, is that you're increasing traffic 40% or so. Well, we got to talk about that to the neighbors on that assumption, if that assumption still goes forward. So what I would like to see is table this to an event, and that event is the alternate funding of State Road 520. Once the alternate funding mechanism for State Road 520 is determined, then we know what the future, a better idea of what the future of the island is, or certainly we minimize a lot of uncertainty behind the demand for the thrift shop.
I'm going to comment, but I guess cheat through a question in here with that, and that is, as we understand, we currently, because of our lack of space, ship a lot of saleable goods off island. We can't sell those today. So to Mike's point, that if the finances seem sort of overly optimistic, can you just speak for a moment to what revenue we're losing, what opportunity cost that goes along with waiting?
Yeah. Well, there are a few things that we've thought about revenue growth. We've also thought about tolling. A couple of things. One is the bins that you approved for us to put in the community are going up in the next couple of months, and we're doing a lot of outreach to groups, and they're welcoming our bins so that we get that flowing in more, because eventually when you have more space, you can't turn around suddenly. You need to have it ready to go. So we're starting that soon, that you get more goods flowing in, and we're making space because we pass on so many goods that we're missing the opportunity for revenue for. So we pass on a lot right now, and although we sell them, it's a very small rate. You do it by the pound. So we have those goods, and we know that those would be ready to go, and those would affect our bottom line. I also, this really dovetails with a lot of our other efforts. We've been doing a lot of PR. We have avenues with schools and universities. We have a lot of ideas for how to get out certain information about sales at certain times of the year to the right populations. So we've thought about how we're going to increase patronage on the store. I think we're fortunate about that we might have a way to deal with tolls, and that's that, because of the community's generosity, our goods are given to us, and so if people spend a certain amount, we will probably comp them their toll. We probably have that opportunity. We would say, there's a sale, or we can do something like that. So we have some ways to think about doing that that wouldn't frighten people away. So we have a couple of things that we're working on, and we think about that quite a bit.
And so just to wrap up, from my perspective, I think we've got a good plan here to carry forward to this next step with, so I support that. What I see is in an informal voting process, you've got 4 votes to 1 to move forward. So, Tom, last word?
Yeah, and just one more thing, again, if we could explore the restrooms and maybe some of that parks money being used towards that, if that pencils out.
I was going to say, as a reminder, the $1.6 million we're talking about excludes an extension of the parking lot. That's $229,000 on top of the $1.6 million. And so the funding source on my head goes to immediately is the beautification fund if you're talking about bathrooms and/or extension of parking lot. And so you don't want to gut it, but there's, as of the end of last year, $571,000 was the ending fund balance, available ending fund balance. So there's quite a chunk of change there, over $500,000.
So speaking for myself, I guess the push to an even larger parking lot didn't feel as necessary as where we were. I mean, sort of squunching parking lot a little bit. That doesn't get you all the way there by any means, but you were doing further expansion beyond where we were before. It wasn't clear that was buying us nearly as much as thinking about taking at least a sliver of that and putting it to bathrooms.
You should consider that proposal in light of the expansion of the thrift shop, in effect, almost no dedicated parking for the park itself, and then maybe hold on a little bit longer until you have your conversation about the Performing Arts Center. Because if that does have a future on the diagonal across the park, it will require access to parking here to meet the parking requirements.
Okay. You'll play around with these options and give us options, or give the public options to look at, and then bring feedback to us. So, do you have anything further you need from us?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's take till 7:21, 10 minutes to sort of do clean up, change room around, and then we'll come back to regular meeting.
Cue video.
Okay. 7:21. Are we up? Very good. Okay, so we return to the regular scheduled meeting, and we have done roll call. We are at appearances. So this is a moment where anybody may address the council on an issue of their choosing. Rules of engagement are on the back wall and I think on the door. 3 minutes. Let us know your name and address when you begin. So we're open for public comments. Excellent. Okay, we're closed for public comments. Oh, Baron! Oh, sorry, you know what, Baron, before you go, I did want to make one announcement, and it may influence what you're about to say.
Okay.
To our agenda at the next meeting, we will add a study session on solicitors and crime. It will be at the beginning of the meeting for an hour.
Okay.
So, if that influences you,
Okay.
there you go.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you. My name is Baron Dickey, 6809 96th Avenue Southeast, Mercer Island. Not only am I a resident here and a citizen of the city, I'm also a PCO. And I talk to a lot of people. I talk to people in my neighborhood, I talk to people in my precinct. And the consensus I'm getting is that the people want solicitors and canvassers licensed on Mercer Island. In February, I brought this to the attention of the council and the staff. I have provided each of you and staff with quite a bit of research, and one of the most comprehensive pieces was done by the Municipal Research Services Center of Washington. It addresses every facet that I can conceive being of concern to the city, including the legal aspects. I have talked to, I have sent each of you copies of ordinances from surrounding cities which are active. I have talked to city staff in these various cities, including their legal counsel, and nobody has expressed any reason why the city of Mercer Island can't do this. I have been promised action by City Manager Conrad and Katie Knight. It's now going on 6 months since I brought this to your attention, and I call for the City Council to take action. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, with that, we'll close public comments and move to minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes tonight. First is the June 3 regular meeting minutes.
I move we accept regular minutes of June 3rd meeting. Second.
Okay, and Jane noted it too. We'll point out that on page 4, Mr. Grady seems to, at the top of page 4, he seems to have moved to make an amendment and then voted against it, which would be a bit odd. It's an error. Ally checked it, and it was Grady moving for it, Mr. Ciro voting against it.
Oh, let me see that.
So she's describing that as a Scribner's error for that purpose.
One other Scribner's error, my name is misspelled in the first page.
All right. So with those minor errors, anything else of more substance? Okay. All in favor of accepting the minutes, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Very good. Move to the regular meeting minutes of June 17. These are revised.
I move to accept the revised City Council minutes of the June 17th meeting.
All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And we move to the regular meeting minutes of July 1st.
I move to accept the City Council minutes of the regular meeting of July 1, 2013.
Second.
Any changes?
Did we get Susan's last name?
Apparently not.
Or does anyone know Susan's last name?
Deb, do you know, we're on page 2, third paragraph, Susan of unknown last name.
Oh. Yes, as a matter of fact, I think Ally corrected that after it went out.
Right.
And
Okay.
she had the last name that's in the final edition of the minutes.
Okay, very good.
It's Sophia, I believe.
Oh, yes, Susan Saphir. Yeah.
All right.
Safir.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Abstain. Abstain.
Abstain. Very good. Okay. You were absent from that one, I guess?
Yeah.
All right. Consent calendar. We have payables and payroll.
I move we accept the consent calendar.
Second.
All right. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Consent calendar carries. We move to regular business. Agenda Bill 4864, status report on city work plan to oppose I-90 tolling with our deputy city manager. Although it says city manager here. No,
it's a part
Yeah.
you're right.
Watch this careful.
Get booted right out the door before you're done. Welcome, Noel.
Thank you. All right, good evening, Noel Treat, Deputy City Manager. It's been a few weeks since we had a formal status report. I know you've all missed it greatly. I've got a couple new developments to report. Things have been a little bit quieter than they have been for a while. And I'll let you know kind of where we are and what's the next things that are coming up that we're keeping our eye on. So give you the status report and then address any questions and discussion. On the WashDOT environmental study, as you know, the legislature's mandated an EIS. I met with WashDOT last week. They're still trying to decide on the exact timeline. They are right now predicting that the final EIS will be to the legislature in January of 2015. They have agreed, after our urging, to do a new round of scoping, including a new round of public comment. And they are working on a timeline for that right now. It's looking like it's probably going to occur in the September to October timeframe. They tell me they will hold another public hearing on Mercer Island. This time they're looking at maybe using the high school gymnasium to provide extra capacity. Because as you recall, last time we were over capacity and it didn't allow everyone an opportunity to attend that wanted to. So they're looking at expanding the venue, probably having a longer period of time so that more people will have an opportunity to speak. And so they're starting to work on those details right now. But it's looking like probably late September, early October would be the date at which they hold that comment hearing. And then they also, as with last time, would have means for people to comment, and other than the hearing, online, by letter, by email, etc. So as that timeline's firmed up, I will be letting you all know and getting word out to our citizens what that timeline's going to be. As you saw in your packet...
Actually, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to ask at each section that we can kind of ask questions then. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to remember all my questions, if you don't mind.
Have at it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So the EIS, the public comment period, I'm not too excited about doing another public comment period as it'll wear down the public. But in that we're doing a comprehensive EIS for tolling throughout, how are they going to, what is their plan for public comment to do that? So you're talking about the people of interest for I-5, I-405, and north and south, east and west, no?
Not exactly. There's two things going on. Remember, there is the I-90 tolling EIS, and then there is the broader regional study that the PSRC is likely to undertake. The legislation on the I-90 specific EIS broadened the study area to areas around the lake, and also now requires that they include study of alternative funding mechanisms that could be used in lieu of tolling. So those are two big changes that have occurred in the EIS work for I-90. EISs also require a longer and more detailed commenting period, so that's another change. But this would be on the I-90 specific EIS itself, not on the regional plan. That's a separate step.
You might walk the council through just the broad major steps of an EIS study, and it's not discretionary. It's in federal law. It's in NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act. And so what he's got on the board right there is just a discussion of the very, very early first two steps in terms of public discussion. So maybe you can...
Yeah, just at a very high level, what they have to do is they have to define the scope of their study. So they have a scoping statement, and they put that out publicly for people to comment on. And people get to comment on that. They get to comment on impacts that need to be analyzed, alternatives that need to be analyzed, and then all of that is taken to complete a study plan, and then that study plan leads to a draft EIS, and then they have to have public hearings on that draft EIS where they accept additional public input before they come up with a final EIS. That process usually takes overall about 2 years, but at a very high level, that's what's happening.
And just the public comment that's referred to here is just public comment on the scope of the study.
Right.
It's not asking any of the details questions, it's just saying what are the edges of this study community, and so we get to go back in. Actually, it's a good thing to have happen. It's a really good thing for us to have happen so that the city and the citizens can weigh in and say, we want you to study these things. And if they don't, and some judge later says, well, you really should have, you've got yourselves, all of this stuff, it's real and important. I mean, you can use it later.
Okay.
Yeah, and particularly in the realm of, alternative funding mechanisms, I think it's really important that because that's not something that was really ever asked about in their round of comment, specifically asked about it when they were in the EA process. Now they must study that. So I think it's something that people are going to want to weigh in on.
Right. I recognize that as part of the EIS, and I appreciate that. What I'm having problems understanding is what our big strategy on messaging was the piecemeal aspect of it. So by tolling I-90, we wanted to include the tolling of the whole area. Not that we wanted to, but our strategy was to include the other gantries on 5 and 5 north, 5 south, 405, etc., how that would be affected. So this EIS will not it will basically be an EIS for piecemeal tolling.
Well, here's what they're telling us right now, and they're still working the details of this out. The PSRC, every word we've heard is the PSRC is going to undertake the regional water study. And WashDOT and PSRC are still working out how they will work together to coordinate the I-90 EIS and the regional study by PSRC. I think we would have, if we had our top choice, we would have said, do one large EIS that encompasses the entirety of the region. But they've elected not to do that. They're not legally required to do that at this point. So instead what they're doing is they're proceeding with the I-90 EIS. PSRC, we think, will be undertaking the regional study, and then those two are working out how they're going to work together to make sure those studies complement each other. That's how they're going about it. And so what we know is the governor's office is involved, the head of PSRC is involved, and they're working out a plan, trying to identify a timeline for how those pieces fit together.
And Mike, another key player in deciding the scope of this EIS will be Federal Highway Administration and Department of Transportation. And that's another place we can go and say we would want a broader discussion of tolling in Central Puget Sound as a backdrop for I-90. And I don't know, they haven't indicated they are looking for that, but that's somebody that, if they agreed with us, can actually have a real influence on what the state studies.
Okay.
And we have made that ask.
Yeah, we have. And I guess the other piece to remember here is, at least the way things are queued up right now, the legislature presumably wouldn't make a tolling decision probably until 2015, which is enough time for both of these studies to be completed. So the region or the state would have the entirety of the studies in front of it before it got to that decision point, hopefully.
Well, when you say that, are you saying that in the backdrop, because we still have to pay for the State Road 520 Montlake extension. Mm-hmm. So when does that bill come due?
My understanding is they don't need to issue the debt for that. They have some flexibility as to when they issue the debt for that, and that things like the problems with the pontoons have pushed their construction schedule out. That the Montlake section of the 520 project is the last segment, so they're going to do that. They're going to complete the bridge segment largely first before they start that next segment. So they have some time flexibility there as to when they actually need the money.
That can really work to our advantage, I think.
So we've got some time, hopefully, which would let the 2015 legislature be the one that might have to look at how do we now pay for, we've gotten the 520 bridge part done, how do we now pay for the Montlake section? That might be something the 2015 legislature, or even later if things get delayed further, we'll have to make the decision on.
Okay, Noel, onward.
Okay. On the federal side, as you saw in your packet and in the emails, Congressman Reichert, who we met with in D.C. last month, has sent a letter to U.S. DOT asking them to please be mindful and take a close look at impacts on commerce and also at the legal question of whether tolling I-90 to pay for 520 is allowed. So we were thankful to get that letter. And then in following our strategy to meet with key regional officials, we're planning a meeting with the regional EPA director here in Washington in August. EPA has an oversight role on the NEPA process, so they're an important player in this as well. Coalition building, as I mentioned, the state and PSRC are still trying to work out how the regional study will be coordinated with the EIS. And then finally on public information, as you know, we're continuing to get email updates out as new things occur.
When's that August meeting?
I think it's the 26th right now is the tentative date of that meeting, yes. All right. Any other questions?
Sure. Statement of need, where are they with statement of need, and how is that our plan to influence statement of need?
Well, the statement of need is part of that scoping comment that they're going to be undertaking in September, October. They haven't yet produced any draft or given us any sense of exactly what that's going to say. It'll probably follow pretty closely what the legislation mandates that they study, but we don't know for sure yet. We will probably get an early preview of that, but I don't yet know when that'll be.
And I've heard discussion that the transportation package might come up on a special session in September. How does that affect, or does it not affect us? Or could it affect, especially with Habib's desire to get that?
Right, well, that's how it could affect us. If there is in fact a special session and there's another run at gas tax, if there is a proposal like that additional 3 cents to pay for 520, then it could negate the need for tolling.
Okay, so discussion part here, and I appreciate the update, but I would like to start leaning forward on the next, how we're proactive, and with the next potential issue would be an assumption that the transportation packet, would be the assumption that the governor calls a special session, and in that special session we bring up the transportation package, that we start thinking about that now with that assumption on how we can influence who we talk to, what we want, what the council wants, getting consensus on what the council wants to pay for 520. Once we pay for 520, it's all taken. So, I would like to see, no, I appreciate the update, but on the next time with the steering committee, the plan going forward with the assumed special session, and if not that special session, then the 2014 session, which inevitably will be the transportation package there.
So I guess my response, Mike, would be, I think we as a council have weighed in a couple of times on the transportation package as it stood within the legislature. What form it takes coming back is probably going to be some last-minute scrambling, because whether it comes back at all, we don't know. What form the whole political wrangling in Olympia takes when it comes back, we won't know. And so I think we're going to have to, I would suggest that the plan would be to be on our toes as that happens and be ready to advocate our interests. I mean, obviously, the package as it stood late in the session was that there was a couple $100 million, some chunk of money that was going to be allocated to 520. We obviously want to be supportive of that. We've the Habib money, we obviously are supportive of that element of it. And we as a council, although you disagreed, have been supportive of the local options, which is separate from the I-90 tolling. But so I think all of those things would still stand as elements that we would view as unchanged, and then it just becomes a question of, is the package warped in some way so much that we have to rethink our position?
Yeah. With the session, the way it ended up, it was clear that where it stopped was in the state Senate, and if there's going to be another special session, it will be because something changed in the state Senate. So one thing that we could do is communicate with our senator our interest in perhaps the Senate taking the lead in finding funding for 520. That would be certainly within Mercer Island's interests.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and that's something we've already been talking about. And just another thing to mention, I'm due to get a proposal. Our state lobbyist that we used, due to get a proposal from him next week as to what his work and proposal for a budget would look like for us going forward from here. So we know that, especially with a short session like they're going to have this next time, that the pre-work in the fall before the session actually starts, even if they don't have a special session, is kind of the critical time. So we'll need to really engage in getting ready for that and getting a strategy in place for that in August and September. So that's kind of the time frame we're looking at.
Okay. Anything else? Tony, did you have something?
So on that suggestion, do we need to...
Actually, the mayor and I have been
Okay.
talking about trying to put something together in the next few weeks where we can do that.
Yeah.
I just have a quick question. Speaking of budgets, how are we doing on our I-90 fund to date?
We still have some budget capacity left, so we're not at a point where we need to ask for additional funding. If
last through the fall, maybe?
I think it'll get us into the fall. The two big costs that I see coming up are, to the extent we use legal counsel to submit any additional comments during the EIS scoping period, that could be a substantial cost. And then second would be the cost of our lobbyists to help us in Olympia starting probably late August or September, yeah. But right now, we still have some funding left to get us a fair way down the road on both those pieces of work.
Thank you.
Okay, Noel, thank you very much. We move to Agenda Bill 4861, Sewer Utility Regulations Code Amendments, first reading. Welcome, Glenn.
Yeah, thank you.
Again.
I know this is the item you've really been waiting for this evening.
Wait a second, we're doing...
The audience is peeling out.
This is sewer.
Such is the world of utilities. I apologize, first of all, for giving you so much heavy reading, because this is a lot to wade through, but you needed to, in July, but you needed to see that we really have an antiquated sewer code, and it really does need to be updated. And the example I gave you that's the most striking is the code relies pretty heavily on the old administrative code of the Mercer Sewer District, which hasn't existed for a long time. It was written in 1960. So to try to help you get through this as you go in your discussion tonight, I'm pointing in just a few directions, things that staff believes are really the significant provisions of the code. A lot of it's just what you'd find in any community sewer code. But first one is right out the gate, 1506.020. That's the definition section. Our old code doesn't really have a definition section, so that resembles the sections of the rest of the city code. So it's significant that that we now have defined all of the things that are in the code. And the second item I draw your attention to is 1506.070, which provides actual standards for engineering and design of the system. And the third piece is 1506.080, right after 070, which provides construction standards for side sewers. This is a very, in our world, this is a very important aspect of the code. And then the fourth section I draw your attention to is 1506.100, which it's a very short section, probably easiest to read in the code, but it's very important. It just describes who's responsible for what, private property owners versus the city. And then finally 1506.130, which talks about discharges into the system that we want people to avoid, most notably fats, oil, and grease, the dreaded fog, which is the bane of all sewer systems right now in the country. So this section gives us more ability to deal effectively with fog problems when we detect them. So if you were to focus on those areas, I think that might help your discussion. It kind of hits on the key points, key provisions. With that, ready for questions. Katie Knight here with legal questions, and then Terry Smith, our utilities operations manager, if you want to talk about operations.
I was gonna urge you to, if you had any question, at least somebody ask Terry, does this provide you the tools you need to keep the sewer system together? Because he has struggled with a very outdated code for a long, long time, and in a lot of the ways, this is about Terry.
Terry, does this give you the tools you need to keep the system together?
Beyond belief.
Thank you. Well, if there's more, we'll have you come up, but for a two-word answer, we'll leave it at that. Mike?
This is a tough agenda for me to packet to follow. I'm going to suggest that we re-tee this up. Sorry, Terry. Re-tee this up. And the staff to go through this and point to us, the council, what are the changes that we really need to be aware of. I just found so much information right there and dry information. I was reading halfway through it, and I realized that I think I was reading the old code and not the new code. So I'll that's a suggestion, and I'll ask the question, are there any changes to this? Yes, there are changes because you outlined them, but I feel like I haven't done my job in reviewing this. because there's so much information here, it wasn't summarized for me, and I don't mind doing a lot of work, but normally we get stuff like this summarized, because you know what highlighted or something. So I'd like this to get I'd like to table this first reading sometime down into the future with a different staff presentation.
I don't mind jumping in on that if that's, unless you want to, Rich. But so Katie Knight, your city attorney, I think you should just look at this as the staff is proposing a brand-new code to the city council and look at it from that point. There's no point in looking back at the old code. As Glenn Becker described, the old code was pretty ancient, and this is actually a project we've worked on for a long time, looking at other cities, looking at what would work for the city of Mercer Island, keeping in mind what our challenges are with regard to the maintenance crew. And I think even in the dashboard, you're going to see a part in there too where you can see where our risks are at. And I can assure you that we work with outside counsel to help us gather some of that information together, and a team of people in the city to go through step by step, word by word, each department, finance, legal, maintenance, to DSG, engineering, to make sure that we had all the tools that we needed to be able to enforce the code, address all the issues that in 2013 the city is seeing and that we expect to happen in the future, keeping in mind we just put down a new sewer lake line. So to go back and to try to compare it against something that's so old didn't make sense to us. And so I think if you view it as a brand new thing and then address it, if you have questions, when you have Terry here and Glenn here, we can answer the specifics, but address it as to the issues and the needs of the city currently as opposed to what was way in the past, what that's worth.
Debbie, and then I'm going to ask, actually, let me, if you don't mind, go first. So I was going to sort of ask Mike's question, but let me try to frame it differently, a little bit differently, and see if it gets us anywhere. And that was simply, in writing this, can you point to anything that's there where you sort of scratched your heads and said, ooh, this one could be trouble, but we're going to go for it? So sort of where is there any controversy within staff around any positions you've taken here, things that where a council would usefully weigh in on this, or where there's the potential for it to become something that you say, oh, we should have done that differently?
As the city manager mentioned, we looked at probably at least a dozen different cities' codes and sewer district codes, and we tried to pick and choose the pieces that we thought made the most sense for Mercer Island. And there's nothing where we're doing anything that isn't middle of the road as far as how you'd approach sewer regulations.
Give an example, Glenn, see, because I don't even know if it's in here or not. In this new proposed code, will we require waterfront property owners to have backflow check valves?
That's a really good example. Yes, we do require that. And currently that's not required, and waterfront homeowners should have that for their own protection.
Yeah. So that's the level that you'll have to get at if you really want to dive into the details. And it is that particular one has been a problem forever. We get sewer backups because the waterfront property owners not maintaining their systems, and they don't have the technology in place to protect the public system. The clog's on their side, and it just keeps on going. And then you get backflow up into the homes.
I should convey to you the story of why I found this to be of such urgency, and I wish Terry had brought it as an exhibit to show you. He came in and he showed me this nasty thing, and he explained to me that this was a clog, and he explained to me what it was comprised of, and that was the day I said, we're fixing this thing, because it was so disgusting. And he tells me, and you'll find in here the sorts of things like don't put down the drain sort of thing, which would seem logical. It's shocking what people put down their drains and what our crew finds, but in light of all of that,
the idea behind how we put this together was to address what's happening to us currently, and not looking back, but looking forward and to seeing what utilities we have now and how do we need to address that currently.
So this isn't a code that drives up sewer charges. It's a code that provides us the tools to enforce and maintain the system. There are times when we just have to walk away when we should be in there doing things because we didn't have the legal authority to do it. You could go at this in the detail as Mike has suggested, and we can chart it all out, and we certainly have all the expertise in the room to do it. Or you can go at it at it'll have to be a much higher level. I don't know that there's this middle ground of sewer code light. So I'm not really sure how you want to approach this. If you want to go into detail, then I suggest we'll have to schedule this over several meetings, I think.
And the Utilities Board has reviewed this as well.
And that's a great point. That's a place where historically sewer issues are vetted, or utility issues are vetted, and by the time the board has recommended something to you, you should assume it's been gone over in great detail.
Debbie, then Donna.
Well, thanks for that explanation, because I think I was feeling a little bit like Councilmember Ciro, where I wasn't sure where I was supposed to go without becoming, an immediate, quick, poor but attempted expert on sewer code. But I would also call out that the example that you just gave us is really important for understanding where we're going to impact the community and where we might be receiving feedback. So if there is a notable segment of the community that's going to suddenly have new requirements in terms of backflow systems, et cetera, I would want to have that kind of thing highlighted for me. So I don't want to slow this down. I don't want to, take this off the board in terms of a reading. But if there is the ability to provide a high level, here are the points that will impact the community, here's some notable changes, and even ways that help us understand the net benefits. I mean, obviously I can imagine the visual was quite powerful. But it would be good to understand in terms of, just a little bit on the dollars and cents that this is causing, because perhaps Mr. Ciro is going to have to, amend something. And I'm sure he'd like to come back and understand what the benefits are more broadly to the community. So sorry to use you as an example.
Quite all right.
I don't know what you're putting down your drains. Oh, me too, Jim.
Mike has a check valve.
I do. I actually have a
Okay, that's great. But again, just a little bit of a Reader's Digest in terms of how this is going to impact the community and who might have some very reasonable and rational questions and how we're explaining it to them.
Well, and another way to maybe frame what's really behind this is this gives us more ability to control our own risk. The code that we have now does not control our risk, as the owner of the sewer system. We are exposed in various ways that we don't want to be exposed. So as much as anything, this is about controlling our risk as the operators of the system.
But I do respect and appreciate it was probably a fairly grueling and tedious process at times.
4 years, actually. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, let's not slow it down too much.
As the utility board representative or liaison, I was going to actually mention that very thing about risk, in that we often discuss backups or big payouts that we've had to make, or lack of clarity of things where we should have been maintaining something versus a private homeowner. And I think the importance of being very specific and laying out who owns what or who's responsible for what and what maintenance will be really important. And especially, I remember the first few meetings when people were talking about fog. I was like, how does fog influence a sewer? But, fats, oils, and greases, Terry's displays and the conversations. And if you think about it, when you clean your pan and you put things down the drain, and if you run cold water even on your pan and you see it congeal on your pan, imagine that's what's going on in your sewer. And so even just kind of raising the ideas and being very clear about, that's a homeowner, part of a homeowner's concern, I think it's really important that we're clear on here. So I think it's great that these have been brought forward. I don't want to see it slow down, but I completely understand that if you're not studied in this, that this is definitely overwhelming. So maybe a cheat sheet of highlights would be helpful.
Mike?
I'm kind of, what I'm hearing, I'm not questioning the utilities' dedication, commitment, and need in the best interest of the city and the citizens to update this. I'm not questioning that at all. I have a job to review these regulations, these ordinances that are updated. Typically, when ordinances, regulations are updated, just be it housekeeping, the staff does a good amount of work to make it very clear for the council. So, I mean, I spent a decent amount of time. I've got 7 questions. I developed 7 questions, but I missed the point about the backflow. I mean, I don't know what else I missed. I have found the citizens out there very unreceptive to me when I say, no offense to the staff, that, well, that was the staff's recommendation, and that's the reason I voted for it. And it doesn't work for that, for me at the QFC at the Starbucks. So I would like, again, for this to be tabled for another first reading, for staff to go over and summarize the changes, putting yourself in my position, that are important, that are changes from before to after. And I'd like to know what those changes are, and then that will be the starting point that I use in reviewing this ordinance, so that I can make a good decision, which I'm sure I'll approve, but the basis from which I can make good research and decision on this ordinance. So that was a request there, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Speaking for myself, what I've heard is this is essentially new enough that we ought to treat it as new, but I share the sense that it would be helpful to have at least a list of breakout highlights, things that you see as points that we should be aware of, and maybe, you know, it's, well, let me broaden that for a minute. Think of this as an education opportunity for the community. So I heard on NPR, they called that thing not fog, but a fatberg in somebody else's sewer system. It was the equivalent of an iceberg, but it was fat in their system. Maybe for the next reading, you have an opportunity here to do a show and tell that helps to educate the public more about what's going down the drain, because at least there's an element of our population that's watching us on TV, and certainly some folks who are here in the audience. So what I would, speaking for myself, like to see, and I think this reflects the majority of the council, but I will ask that in a second, would be that when this comes back for a second reading, that there's some cheat sheet of highlights that comes with it, and to the extent that you feel it's appropriate to do a show and tell of some greater, bring a check valve too, a clean one, along for us to see what these things are. Right. That kind of thing, I think, would go some way towards helping us understand what we're dealing with. So that's where I am. Jane, you get the floor, and I'm going to quickly just see whether I've captured the will of the majority of council well enough.
Yeah, you've captured my opinion on this, but I just have a quick question. Do we have any septic tanks anymore on the island?
There are a handful.
That are actually operating as people not hooked up to the sewer? Okay. This, I mean, I do think we need to treat this as like a new ordinance, because we can't expect the kind of format we've had where the old wording is replaced by the new wording. That's not going to work. But a little cheat sheet of some kind would help. It reminds me of, now this is a way long time ago, when the city was going to be just cleaning up some regulations throughout the code that had to do with shoreline, with docks and covered moorage and all that, and it was just going to be administrative and just cleaning it up and putting it together in one place. And it turned out to be kind of a big deal because some of those old ordinances hadn't been enforced very much, and so it looked like something new. It became a huge brouhaha in the public, and it was very confusing. So I think in this case, if we knew what are the highlights of how this is different from the practice of enforcing the regulations, and that would be very helpful, and probably avoid some trouble.
Yeah, you're actually hitting on a key point there. As the agenda bill says, the enforcement section isn't there.
Right, yes.
That's still being developed code-wide.
Well, let me just do a quick correction on that. What we did, and just to, and again, we've been working on this for a very long time and going through to see what's going to be the best method and sort of cart before the horse sort of thing, trying to decide which was the best way to come. Our intent, it currently addresses what we have on the books for enforcement provisions. Our intent is to come back with you with a new enforcement code that's going to address a more overarching piece, and it will be complicated because we're going to be addressing a lot of the different codes, including the sewer code. And so this is why we took this first bite at the apple, and then we'll have to do little modifications throughout the code to make sure that they all go to that central enforcement code. Our code always needs constant updating, and how it sits now, different sections have different enforcement proceedings, and we're trying to standardize those so that when people come in, they know here's what the enforcement piece is going to be. So this does have current enforcement as it stands now, but we're going to modify and update that as well.
Good, thank you.
When I think about this, I'm trying to picture how this is going to work. If you just scratch below the surface, there is a lot. What you're about to do is go into how does a municipal sewer system work, and in detail. And then at the same time, our style when it comes to dealing with ordinances is to deconstruct them in their wording. And that by itself can be a pretty challenging exercise. I wonder whether in this case it might help just to have the staff come back with a list from this ordinance of the significant problems that are getting solved, and where in the ordinance it addresses that problem. And tackle this more as a problem-solving exercise rather than a ordinance drafting exercise or a sewer system soup to nuts course. Because if you want it, we can do it that way. But I just think you're going to be at this for a long time if you dive all the way to the lowest level of details. We're going to have to give you a whole lot of background, and you could then make a policy matter out of almost everything technical. And I don't think that's the role that you play.
No.
But you do play a role in solving problems or having us help you solve problems, and maybe we can tackle it that way. Glenn, does that help to Terry to try and list the 20 things that we're fixing here in terms of problems, not code language, but problem solving?
It's both operations and development, private development too.
We're looking at this kind of out of context, like here's new ordinance, what do you think? So I think given what you suggest, it's a good idea. It'll help us see the problems this new ordinance is solving.
I'm just trying to think of it in terms of outcomes. What outcomes are we shooting for here, and why are they important, rather than for you to decide how to run a sewer system?
No.
Because that's where you'll get to, or you may.
Everybody okay with that? Okay.
Will that be a first reading or second reading?
I think a second reading.
I think you'll be at it more than one meeting, so we'll call it second and third and whatever it takes for you to get comfortable to vote on it.
But Mike, you had some questions tonight. Do you want to run through those, or?
Depending what the council, I don't mind just waiting for the, the next agenda, because I think we're going to get into more meat and...
Maybe they send them to staff in advance.
Yeah, I'll send them to you, Glenn.
Yeah, I should do that.
Thank you.
So can you clarify about the first reading, second, third, fourth? So 2 are required, but we can have as many as we want, is that the idea?
As a technical matter, there is no requirement other than the requirements you set as a council. There's no state law that says first reading, second reading. That's purely a style of individual cities. We, as a city, some time ago, when it came to ordinances, set a policy or a practice of having a first reading and second reading. Initially, it was all around, was it Title 19? It was all about land use, that we couldn't do a land use ordinance change without giving the public more than one bite at the apple. We have since extended that a little bit beyond just land use to other ordinances, but we've also had as a practice, and the council's been pretty consistent, with suspending that rule for purely technical, mostly financial ordinance changes, typically like when he does his quarterly budget adjustments. So anything you do in that regard is totally up to the council.
So if we suspend, or if we continue this being the first reading, and then we have a second one, we could have a third one, and you just keep going at the will of the council.
Yep. And we could do that because we love sewer. Okay. I think we are done on this subject for now. Everybody okay with that? Okay, and clear on the plan of attack? You'll work that, you'll get some comments back from Mike, and we'll see this again.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We move to Agenda Bill 4862, 2012 Mercer Island Dashboard Report. Welcome, Chip.
Good evening, my friends. So, sorry this took so long to get to this year. There's a couple of critical bits of data I did not get until end of June, early July, and so I wanted to have that available. I have some options for you. I've put together a series of, goes through roughly half of the indicators, kind of a slide for each one. The ones that I thought were kind of interesting and stand out, we can take that approach, but that's going to be longer than 10 minutes, and we can take questions as we go along. I could focus on the 4 slides, indicators I mentioned on the face of your agenda bill, the ones I kind of call needs attention, and we could just focus on those. Those slides are in here, by the way. Or I could simply just keep it wide open. We just take questions from the council. I'm totally flexible. What's your preference?
Anybody?
4 slides.
4 slides.
4 slides.
4 slides, all right.
There he is. Needs attention.
I'm getting to know you. That's what I figured you could.
All right.
Just as a matter of perspective for
We did the mama bear, baby bear, papa bear approach, and put that one in as the...
No worries. And it's spectacular outside, and people would like to return home, I'm sure. Real quickly, just for the community's benefit, this dashboard encompasses 35 what I call kind of top-tier indicators that cut across our 6 priorities of government. Over the half the indicators are broken down into kind of additional sub-indicators to give you a little more context and perspective. There's a new indicator for 2012. I removed under priority of government number 4, which relates to neighborhood and downtown attractiveness, I removed code enforcement complaints and replaced it with annual development activity as expressed in terms of number of permits and valuation by permit type. And we'll get to that in just a moment. Also, for those that are really interested, don't want to read through because it is a long report, just focus on the report card summary section. It's just pages 3 through 9 as I recall, and you get a quick glimpse of each indicator. All right. Public safety overall, in terms of police and fire, came out very, very well. It has in the past. Here's one of my favorite indicators. This relates to our violent and property crime rates. A little caution here. This is on page 10 of Exhibit 1 of your agenda bill. There's a new reporting system that's permeating the state. It's called NIBRS, National Incident-Based Reporting System, versus UCR, Uniform Crime Reporting, and not everyone is converted over to NIBRS, as it's called, and so the data for 2012 is not perfectly valid. However, having said that, having Dave Jokinen, one of our police commanders, review this, he felt that this was still representative and still useful, so just in interest of complete and full disclosure. Mercer Island looks very good amongst this group of 6 cities. The first number relates to violent crimes, the second property crimes. The lower the number, the better. And this has typically been, St. Andrews has been just slightly better than Mercer Island. Mercer Island's always been like number 2 amongst this group of 6 cities. Related to the King County average, King County did not provide us data, so I could not provide an average for 2012, but traditionally the numbers for the whole county are quite a bit higher than Mercer Island and Sammamish, not surprisingly. Our crime rates, what are they driven by? What are they related to? Very small commercial sector, okay? Very few arterials. The demographics of the community in terms of highly educated, high median income, and then I-90. We have that going through us, whereas Sammamish does not. I sense a question or two. Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you. So, you know how I just, the hair on the back of my neck, what happens to it whenever I see us compared to other communities, because I think it should be one that we're just compared to Mercer Island. It's too much of an apples and oranges, and there's no use in doing it. But having said that, I'd like to talk about going from UCR to NIBRS.
NIBRS, yeah.
Right, NIBRS. Mm-hmm. So for 2012, we're under NIBRS?
It's a combination for us. Why no? It's not ideal.
I mean, okay, well then I'll ask a question. Why, if we're making the jump to NIBRS, why are we not backdating the 2011, 10, 9, and 8?
Hasn't been.
So we have an apples and oranges.
I don't know if we'll be converting to that yet. It just started happening this year, so folks are so stretched.
On the Public Safety Committee, it sounds like we are.
They haven't.
Ed, do you want to address it?
Sure, and for your record, Police Chief, NIBRS is actually much more labor intensive, and so it's quite a bit of work getting the conversion from UCR to NIBRS in the first place. So we're getting systems set up so that here forward, our record system can accept that kind of data. So I think going back, I don't personally find value in us going back, especially because other cities won't. I mean, it would be a humongous project to go back and try to dig up old case reports. UCR will capture the most serious crime, and then lesser crimes underneath it aren't counted in UCR. Under NIBRS, they are. So we would have to go back and dig up all the old case reports and find out what cases where there were multiple crimes, which of cases existed with that dynamic, and then try to extract that, and I'm not.
Okay, well, I mean, that's fair enough. So what I'm hearing is you can always do a better measurement, right? You can always do a better measurement, but there's always a value in having continuity of bad measurements, or not as good measurements. So what you're saying is we're going to have better data with this NIBRS. It's going to improve our crime fighting ability, and you can't compare 2012 to the prior year.
Yeah, it's not apples to apples, and it's probably somewhat similar to when we converted over to a new dispatch center, and they calculated and captured data differently. When we went to Kirkland, they captured data differently than we had beforehand. So every once in a while, every X number of years, when there's a conversion to some sort of a different data system, you're going to have those times when you need to recognize maybe an asterisk at the bottom of that year saying, hey, from this point forward, numbers look a little different, and here's why.
Just stepping back from the trees to get to the forest, which is what the dashboard's about, by Mercer Island standards, are crime rates higher or lower, or what's the trend, and by our regional standards? Are we a high, medium, low crime rate?
Yeah, we continue to be very low.
That's the point here. That's the point.
Well, that's one point, and you asked the other question, but Ed, you didn't answer it yet. But it's right there. But relative to our historical past records for Mercer Island, how are we doing by this measure?
Yeah.
And the answer, I mean, obviously, is we're about flat, right? We're not dramatically worse. We're not dramatically.
I mean,
better.
some areas we go up a little bit, and we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall.
Okay, John.
So with the hot issue being solicitor crime, potential related crime to solicitors, when you were talking about the NIBRS, and you were mentioning there was more detailed and that it was going to go down to lower level crimes. Is the current UCR capturing car theft, break-in, that sort of thing, is that considered under property crime, or is that considered a lower level crime that's not currently captured but would be under NIBRS?
There may be some of the lower level crimes that were not captured under UCR that are in NIBRS, but as far as the burglaries go, those are usually on the top of the list as far as the seriousness of the crime. So I'm not here to say that an increase in burglaries is due to a change in our metric we're using. We're seeing an increase in burglaries because there's an increase in burglaries, as there are in other communities around here. So when I said I was going to talk about that later, I guess I'll talk for a moment about that now then. So yes, and you mentioned solicitors, and we have, as I mentioned to the Public Safety Committee, while we're on this topic, and then I'll move on so Chip can get going, but while we are on this topic, there's one case that we know for sure in the last 10 years where a solicitor was responsible for a burglary. Is it possible that that's the case in other instances? Yes, but it isn't something that we've seen evidence of.
Onward.
And I just remembered, I promised I would focus on the 4 needs attention, and I stopped on this first one, so I apologize. But this one jumped out at me because it's a little wonky because of the change in reporting systems. So I'll go back to focusing on the needs attention items.
Okay.
Court operations. I should not have called this needs attention because it conveys this feeling that something's not being operated properly. That is not the case. I just want to help connect the dots for you on what really happens here. If you look at the bottom, this is from a finance guy, business perspective only, okay? You look at that bottom line, you see those percentages, that's a ratio of revenues to expenditures, court revenues to court expenditures. When we made the decision way back when and brought, like our court, took on the responsibility of operating our own court back in 2005, and Kirkland and others did, prior to us, they did so with the expectation that the revenues would cover their costs. So that's why I developed this kind of business metric that if revenues are greater than at least 100% of your costs, and generally they have, and our revenues have. Since inception, our revenues have covered our costs. 2012, they did not. Why? That's totally driven by the number of citations, tickets, what have you, that are actually issued by our police officers, ours, and Newcastle. That's not pointing the finger at them. That's simply saying that things change over time. For example, as you get new officers, they tend to be more aggressive in writing tickets, and as they become more seasoned, they become less aggressive, and it ebbs and flows over time. And all I'm pointing out here is I think it was in 2008, as I recall, we had some new officers, and you look at our total number of cases filed, that's the highest in that 5-year period. And it's come down over time, and the judge can tell you that, the police chief can tell you that, it ebbs and flows with time. Okay? And so there's nothing to do, there's no concern about how the court's being operated, just from a purely business perspective, just a little concerning that the revenues weren't covering expenditures for 2012. Yes, ma'am.
And this is with didn't you reduce the number of court hours of the judge? So this is factored into that?
Yes. This also reflects, we reduced the court administrator down by half a position. What was that, 2009? Maybe it was 11. I worked too many years at the same time. So
the other context here, the alternative to a municipal court is the county district court. And even though our revenues and expenses may have been a little out of balance this time around, I can promise you if we'd gone back to the district court and paid the county's contract fee, that gap would have been much, much wider. So we're still, it's still from a business point of view, a much wiser move for us to run our own court than do it through the county. And we also, I think, give better service. It's kind of an odd thing to talk about in, processing cases for DUI and parking infractions, but I think we do give better service.
Yeah. Okay. Can I move on to our next needs attention?
I just want to add a comment here, which is you put needs attention, you sort of hesitated on that. I just, from my perspective, I'm uncomfortable with a message that seems to be
you, police force, aren't writing enough tickets, get busy.
And that's not the intent.
And that's not
That's
a
why I
message,
didn't-
that's not a message I'm comfortable being supportive of. So, yeah, Ed, maybe if you can come down, just so you and I can do a little thing where I say, that's not what I'm hoping we're doing, and you can say, that's not what we're doing, and then we can move onward. I think we all understand the intent is that we have safe streets, not that we'd be writing tickets to support a court system of a certain size, but can you just speak to this?
Sure. I can say with absolute certainty, I've never felt from anybody, from Rich or for any of the council members, any sort of pressure to generate revenue. We enforce the laws strictly on a safety basis through the safety perspective, and it's never been, and I don't like the whole notion of writing tickets to generate revenue. I'm very uncomfortable with that, as are you. The other reason, part of the Chip talked about different officers. You get brand new officers. I prefer the word proactive versus aggressive, but you get them very proactive. We're also down an officer when a position is frozen. That does play into this. We mentioned a moment ago, to answer Councilmember Sen's question on burglaries, we have had an increase in burglaries, and burglary cases take an officer off the road, so they're writing a report. We've also changed some of our police tactics, where the officers will wander through the neighborhoods more than spending time writing a traffic citation. They will spend some more time either on foot or covertly going through the neighborhoods looking for potential burglars. There's a lot of things that play into that, but to your point there, Mayor, I've never felt that, nor do I receive that message now, that they need to write tickets so as to generate revenue, so I appreciate that.
To sort of round out the picture particularly about burglaries, you've had an increase in burglaries. You've also had an increase in burglary arrests as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. There's the other side of this. They do get caught.
Yeah, and hopefully you'll see something. I wrote a little article, hopefully that'll get out in the media there, on some of the great arrests that our patrol officers have made while burglars are in the act, and then our detectives have made via some good follow-up work on the detective side of things. So hopefully that'll get out there and you'll see that too. So thank you.
Good. Thank you.
And thank you for making that point. That's exactly what I wanted to come out. And in the future, I will come up with something besides needs attention when it's not, clearly it's not that. Okay, financial condition. It's already received your attention during the budget process for 13 and 14 last year, where the council, there were a number of non-service level reductions, reduction in general fund subsidy, there were utility tax enhancements, 1% property tax. So the council took a number of steps last year to help improve this financial condition ratio going forward. As I look at 2013 and projections for next year, development activity in particular is significantly better than what I had projected last year for 13 and 14 during the budget process. So my expectation is this financial condition ratio will definitely be over 1 for 13 and also in 14. It's going in the right direction. Okay? This is a biennial citizen survey question that was conducted back in 2012, but I always attribute it to the prior year. This relates to percentage of residents who believe the city is doing a good or excellent job of maintaining, in this case, the city's streets, and then the sidewalks and ped bicycle paths. Just wanted to call your attention, in 2011, those percentages were in the 60s. 67% for streets, 65% for sidewalks, ped bicycle paths. Just interesting to kind of track that over time.
This is the one I always point out to you. All the other services we get the data on are in the 80s and 90% satisfaction. And when it comes to our sort of broader transportation-related operations and capital, it tends to be at the bottom of the list. And that's when I point out that if we're going to make headway on those areas, we need another funding source. We can only maintain our arterial streets and our residential streets on an ongoing basis with the funding that we have now. So the rest of the stuff, as you know, is on the table, and someday you'll have to face that.
While I'm touching on the citizen survey, as a reminder, it's planned for next year, January, February 2014. However, it is not funded. And my hope is, when I come back to you, it's what's called the mid-biennial budget review, kind of in the middle of the biennium, in November, the second meeting in November, we'll then take a look at how our revenues are looking, and maybe there's some money that we can carry over, excess revenue, from this year to next year to help fund. Remember last time it was $12,500, about the same kind of survey. I'll pitch that to the council, see if there's some majority interest in continuing the survey or not at that time.
Tom and then Mike.
I just want to point out on this question or this indicator that there's a third bullet that you didn't put up here that's parks, trails, and open space, and that it went from 90% to 86%.
Right.
And I just want to highlight that too, because, that's important in showing that people probably the people have a passion for parks, trails, and open space and want to see that continue to be, or improved maintenance. So I don't want to lose that emphasis. As we're looking at here, we're looking at streets and sidewalks, but in the same indicator, we also talk about the trails, the green and open spaces, and that has come down a little bit too. So when we think about what we're funding and where emphasis should be, or where people have concerns, definitely want to highlight that has gone down over the past survey as well.
Mm-hmm. The reason I excluded it is it didn't fall into the 60s, but yes, it did come down a little bit.
Mike?
Well, I kind of look at it as maybe a need to reprioritize where these fund balances go, and that's kind of the backdrop that I have with the thrift center. If this is where the critical, we know that maintaining our streets are a priority of government, and evidently this stat shows that we can do more improvement. What I would rather see us do before we jump to a new revenue source, tax, is look at the fund balances on all the different funds that we have, and like I said at the beginning 7 months ago when we raised taxes, we don't need to raise taxes because we have fund balances that we can use either not to raise taxes or we're past that. If we have to address this before we think about another new tax, we use those fund balances to address this problem.
So, Councilman, are you advocating for continued surveys so that we have this data to support your point?
Well, no, because we have, we're doing, with reference to streets, we have the PCI, which can give us a very objective analysis of where our streets are, and it will address that 67%. We know once we have fair or fair streets, those need to be fixed, and those fair and those failed streets are what's driving a low 67% estimation of our streets.
I'd just like to put a pitch in for continuing the survey. This data are very valuable, and it establishes a pattern over time, and I really like the idea that we could plan now for an additional question or two related to perhaps Performing Arts Center or something we want to find out about. And I think were we to stop doing this, it would be a very big mistake. And, maybe I'm a glass half full kind of person, but close to 70% of the people are pretty happy with the streets and the sidewalks. So I don't see that as a terrible indictment. I think we're pretty lucky, considering the fact that we've gotten through incredible recession, and we haven't had to cut back and make a mess of, ignore our streets and sidewalks and infrastructure. So anyway, I don't think it's so bad.
Onward.
One more indicator. Okay, this is the one that I probably feel the most passionate about, that I feel the greatest responsibility to bring to your attention. It should not be a surprise. It relates to our water utility infrastructure condition. I personally find value in comparing ourselves to other jurisdictions. I kind of tweaked it this year and got a few more jurisdictions on there. Terry Smith has done a great job of gathering the data and kind of twisting people's arms to provide this kind of data. It's measured in terms of number of water main breaks per 1,000 service connections. What you'll find for Mercer Island is we're at the bottom of the pack. And whoops, I mislabeled the very last column. That's really 2012 data, not 11 data. And we'll see the jurisdiction average is 0.19 water main breaks per 1,000 service connections. We're at 1.18. Last year was a bit of a unusual year. We had a large number of breaks. That happens from time to time. You know, it's not always 2 or 3 or 0. You get these little spikes that happen. Last year was a spike year. You might ask, well, why? So I provided in your packet just some perspective pieces of information that help, in my belief, kind of answer that question. The first most important piece is, from a perspective, is look at the age of your system. 40%. One more time, 40% is more than 50 years old, okay? Now, it's one thing if we're Phoenix, Arizona, where everything is flat and we don't have seismic activity. It's another thing in Mercer Island where you have lots of terrain undulation. You have weather that causes, whether it's rain or cold, that causes shifting of the ground in addition to the seismic activity. This is a difficult situation in which to have stuff underground, is my point, and especially when it's old. Now, Terry will tell you, hey, there's stuff that's been out there in various cities and just fine for 60-plus years. Absolutely. All I'm saying, given our set of criteria, the way we are, there's greater risk associated with living on Mercer Island, Northwest for that matter, but definitely Mercer Island with just the way things are. And so the thing I've been trying to bring to the Council's attention and the Utility Board's attention for the past 3 budget cycles is we will need to do more if you want to manage your risk on doing more capital projects as it relates to our water utility. Now, we made a conscious decision. This is not an indictment. This is not a criticism or point the finger. I totally get it. When you're doing the sewer lake line, big, expensive, $25 million project, huge impact on sewer rates. We all, staff included, we made a conscious decision to try to keep the water rates. They still were higher than some of you wanted, but I wanted the water rates even a little bit higher, quite honestly. We kept them down a little bit, try to manage our overall utility rate impact to our customers for a 4-year period, 07 through 10. So that there's some consequences with doing that kind of thing, is my point. And so staff is in the process of gathering some additional data and trying to really zero in. This is complex. This is not, we got to focus on the stuff that is 50 years old and only that. It's complicated by the fact that some of it is there's an undercapacity issue, right? And we need to deal with that because more homes have gone in over the years. You don't want to tear up the streets multiple times. You want to just, tear it down up once. And so there's all these things you're coming into to the decision process, which make it very complex. I'm simply giving you a heads up that in staff's opinion, I'm not speaking just as finance guy, but in staff's opinion, we need to do more. We're hoping to bring more information to the council when we come to you in November, okay, during the mid-biennial budget review. We'll also be talking about utility rates at that same meeting and give you a better sense of, do we need to do more in 14 next year, or can we wait till 15? Questions? The sky's not falling. There's just more risk.
Okay, I'll try to ask a question here. Number of water main breaks per 1,000 service connections. I'm trying to figure out why that is such a direct relationship on why that's the right measurement. Per 1,000 service connections. Would it be, I don't know, length of pipe? Because are breaks happening at service connections, or are breaks happening in between a run?
I'm just the finance guy. I do find this stuff interesting. I do love this stuff. Glenn, I'll say something real quickly, and you can step in. It's a system, and whenever we have more intersections, connections to the system, you're increasing your risk of there being problems versus it being just a closed loop and one connection.
We lay mains to serve connections.
What's that?
We lay water mains
Yes.
to serve connections.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's mains that break.
Yeah.
I mean, it's as simple as that. If we had fewer connections, we'd have fewer miles of pipe, because we're laying pipe to get to the connection, to the homeowner.
The proxies for each other. I mean, you could use one, you could use the other. We happen to use...
Some cases we use per capita proxies. That doesn't make sense, in our opinion, here. The professionals, meaning Terry, suggest this is what they use.
Right. Some breaks occur actually where the service line enters the main. Other breaks occur in between services. The more times you drill into a pipe, though, to do service connections, the more you're weakening the pipe and increasing the chances of breaks.
And I'm guessing that if Terry were here, he would say, this is averaging out across the whole island, but he has pockets in the island that have even higher frequencies because the pipes are older. The East Seattle neighborhood has had water and sewer issues for years because some of that stuff's 50, 80, 90 years old. First Hill used to have lots of problems both in capacity and in just reliability. It's gotten significantly better in the last couple of years because we pretty much replumbed First Hill. Yeah. But I think what Chip's saying is the plumbing's getting old, and these problems aren't going to go away. They're just going to increase until we start to modernize our plumbing.
Yeah, and another factor too isn't just the age of the pipe, it's the construction methods during those eras weren't what they are today. So it's a double whammy.
That's all I have for the concerns. I see a question.
It was actually more of a comment that at the utility board, we talk a lot about, the breaks or the potential for the breaks or the age of pipes, and we always talk about the projects that they want to do and that we could do, and, we pare it back, and then we come up with a rate, and we lower that rate as much as we can that we think would be tolerable. And as you can see here, there's always more to do. And so when we enter the phase where we're going to talk about utility rates again, of course, we're going to want to be responsible and take into keep in mind what people can pay, but we also have to keep this factor in mind that we do have really old infrastructure, and old infrastructure often breaks.
Just one other thing comes to mind. When was it last year we were digging up or doing Island Crest Way, and there was a section of pipe. We checked it out. It was slated for replacement, and we decided, no, it's good enough condition.
Sometimes we're pleasantly surprised when we actually expose the pipe, take a sample, evaluate it. It's not a problem.
Yeah. And so, in any case, I should mention that one of the things that sewer has that's an advantage over water is the sewer inspection video, that riveting stuff where I think we just about made it through our entire infrastructure, but it allows you to pinpoint where there are problems, right? It's ideal in that regard. We don't have that level of data with the water system by comparison.
You can watch it anytime you want.
Oh, it's cool stuff.
It's a bit sort of
must-see TV.
French film. It's kind of, the plot is thick.
Yes.
I have to admit I did have some concerns when we were going through the budgeting process that we were selling our utility infrastructure a little bit short, and, for good reason. But this is something that is clearly, you can only kick it down the road so far. And when you have the tour groups of the kids who come through City Hall and you're trying to give them a sense of what it is that the city does, it's that so much of it is you don't know what we do until it doesn't work. And if you turn on your water and it's yucky, or if it doesn't come out, or your toilet doesn't flush, then you're upset. But you don't turn on the tap every day and think, wow, great service coming from the staff at the city, which is de facto really what's happening. And what I don't want to see happen with the utilities is that this becomes a significant pain point for a significant number of our residents. I want us to not be too far in advance, but not to be behind the 8 ball in terms of making sure that we're repairing the infrastructure, replacing the infrastructure before it's even more expensive based on damage done to homes or businesses, to streets, etc. So, this is just reiterating in my mind as we move forward. It's not elegant, it's not glamorous, but it is one of those services that you just assume works, and that's our job, is to make sure it keeps working. So I appreciate the bad news, if that makes sense, but I think we've got to keep it forefront.
Okay. Chip, anything else?
I'm out of words.
All right. Thank you very much. You're welcome. And council members, you're okay?
I actually have a question. So I saw where this cut on sustainability, on the effective and efficient public service, this would be number 18.
What page are you on?
You know, I don't have the page on my notes here.
Page 24, exhibit 1.
It's average fuel efficiency. I see where we're going to, and I commend that we're going to include police vehicles. I never quite understood why we didn't include police vehicles. But with this switch, this change, this discontinuity in data, making prior year comparisons difficult, this I'll suggest to the staff is a time to look at looking at total fuel usage, diesel and gasoline usage, instead of MPG in our criteria for looking at vehicle sustainability. I think we talked about that. It looked like you had a little bit of traction on it 12 months ago, Mr. Mayor. This would be an ideal time to do it, with the discontinuity of including police vehicles, to let's include all the gasoline and diesel, and you could even take it one step further depending upon what the director over here says, mileage expense forms. Again, would be easy enough to figure out. Does that make sense?
It does. I guess from my perspective, there's Rich as the guy, the green evergreen fleets guy. I see value in both, in our pros and cons to going where Mike's suggesting. Certainly from a carbon footprint standpoint, total number of gallons is what you care about. From a how are you improving your fleet over time, MPG is a little bit more of a close-in measure.
You could do both. I think if doing just fuel consumption has the risk of there's seasonality. You know, one big snowstorm and all of a sudden Glenn's diesel consumption can go through the roof. You have to find some way to average things out over 12 months, and an efficiency measure as opposed to a consumption measure does that. But you can do both. I mean, we have the luxury that other cities don't have. We don't have this growth track because our population is growing, or we're annexing new land and we're buying new vehicles. We're pretty stable, and so consumption statistic is reliable as far as that goes. We're not going to get bigger in terms of appetite for fuel.
Are there any other big drivers that you, a winter, so it's not sort of a month-to-month thing, because this is an annual measure that you're looking at here. So a year with several snowstorms would come out looking bad, whereas a year with no snowstorms would look much better from that respect.
Yeah.
In that respect.
When I say seasonality, I mean so unusual seasonal fluctuations.
Are there other big drivers that we should be aware of?
Power outages would drive up diesel costs on our sewer pump stations.
I might add that in a real hot summer, Marine Patrol will consume more fuel if the lake is really busy. There's been a few years ago, we had a really cold, damp, wet summer, not a lot of activity out there. They did not consume as much fuel. But if you're looking for irregularities, that would be one from our department you would see, based on weather.
Ed puts out an order that there's going to be more bike patrol than car patrol. Our consumption will just plummet.
Mike, to your point, I think the takeaway I get from this, and I'll look for your feedback, is I don't think, while I care about total number of gallons used, I'm not sure I want to try and manage to that, because I don't want them to say, well, we're leaving the snowplows at home when it's snowing, or we're leaving the boats at home when they ought to be out on the lake, because those feel like they're driving the wrong direction. What I'd prefer is that if you're putting the snowplow out,
it's a more efficient plow, or the boat out, it's a more efficient boat. So it feels like that drives it a little bit more logically.
Well, I mean, I don't think, it's just like, I truly believe that our police officers feel absolutely no pressure to write tickets. I truly feel that our directors and police officers would sacrifice their mission to accomplish a average fuel efficiency or carbon footprint. I mean, I don't see that. It's just like the energy usage. I was going to talk about the next one, number 19. It's just like the energy usage measurement. That is very much dependent upon weather. Colder days, or warmer days, depending upon what season you are. The beauty of tracking gallons of diesel or gas, you measure the whole. It's very holistic. You measure behaviors. Maybe they're not gunning the vehicles as much as they would, or you're also capturing all these little four-wheel things we have going around. You capture everything. Maybe we're not. Maybe we can be more efficient in the way we test our generators.
What I'd suggest, you guys, it's not hard. We capture that data. I mean, you were always monitoring gallons consumed, and actually gallons purchased.
So we budget.
Yeah. So we already have the data. Let's just report it, but let's not set a goal. I think that the problem would be setting some sort of target might have some unintended consequences, but let's just keep an eye on it, and we'll report it to you.
So we take an and approach.
Yes, an and approach.
Well, that was easy. Okay.
Done.
Chip, thank you very much. We move to other business. Councilmember absences, we have 2. Can we get someone offering motion to excuse our absent council members?
I move to excuse Councilmember Grady and Grubbs.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Council members are excused. Any upcoming absences of which we should be aware? I have mentioned that I will be missing from the next meeting. And I will also be missing, although it doesn't show up here, from the September 15th meeting.
So the mayor would like to have 5 public hearings on all controversial topics.
That's right.
That'll be a month and a half. Won't that be a month and a half?
No, I'm here for the first September meeting.
Because August 15th, we do not have.
Yeah, which actually brings us, we need to officially axe that as well. Anyone else with absences? Okay, planning schedule.
So, it looked pretty stable until you decided you really wanted to dive into sewer code. I'm going to have to revise this because we're not going to adopt it in 15 minutes. So let me work on that. I'm inclined, actually, it would have been a pretty full meeting anyway, I'll pull it to later in the year and we'll go into it in some more depth. Otherwise, I think we're in pretty good shape. I think we're balanced all the way through the end of the year.
And you and I have talked earlier about the study session getting shifted from DSG
yes, that's correct.
Solicitors.
We'll move that fee study to probably September 3rd study session, and we will use August 5th to do solicitors. How long do you want to spend with the neighborhood? Maybe try to get something in September after Labor Day?
Yeah, I'm thinking we won't be able to engage very well until we get to Labor Day. So
yeah, you need the fall.
We're balancing that against Chip's got some anxiety about just losing time, and we need to get on with this thing and get the new building open if we're going to do it. So
Maybe we schedule it for early September.
I don't think you can't realistically do it in August, so you're not going to have results in early September.
Right. We hold a meeting.
Like an open
Well,
house?
the public meeting, public meeting early September, back to council.
Maybe we can get it back to you by September 16th. We can shoot for that.
Well, that's right, okay. 16th, not 15th.
A legal update, I mean, it's been, unless we had one at the meeting on this.
We did.
Really?
We did.
Okay, maybe I can have a meeting with you, Katie, and bring you up to speed. Okay.
Anything else on the planning schedule?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. Board appointments. We do have a board appointment. One of the folks we appointed previously then had to step down. So there were two people who applied for that slot, which made it convenient. I simply proposed the other candidate. So that's what you have before you. So I'm looking for a motion to approve Benjamin Elliott.
I move to approve the appointment of Benjamin Elliott to the Youth and Family Services Advisory Board.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Council member reports. Debbie.
We did have a community outreach session at Joya, and that was on July 3rd, so we had Deputy Mayor Grouse, myself, and City Manager Conrad who were there. We did go through just the state of the city, and obviously had a very heavy focus on I-90 status on I-90 tolling. And there was, I think, a very healthy turnout. There was a very lively discussion. The two things that I walked away with that are really resonating with that particular group is, of course, I-90 and what that means, but also some of the street and downtown traffic concerns they have regarding the street that's just in front of them. I say it's 76.
It's block crossing, we got...
Crossing.
So speed, volume, mid-block crossing, et cetera, and I think I walked away realizing that there's really not much more in postponing this. Obviously, there's some key development projects taking place, but I think that that's just indicative of the importance for us to make sure that that's an incredibly safe corridor for all of our residents, as well as the motorists, too, who are coming around some blind corners and few access points, et cetera. So it was a good meeting. It was very positive, and they seemed quite appreciative of our time. So I think we need to do more.
Good. Jane?
Yes, the Arts Council has been very busy. They have 4 new members who've all had their orientation and very energetic and excited. As you know, the artist-architect team for the 1% for Art for the fire station's been selected. John Cisco, artist, sculptor, and his partner, architect, Jim Brown, were selected. It's going to be a really exciting project. On their own, they approached the Port Authority in New York City and were able to obtain for our fire station an artifact from the 9/11 tragedy. So it's part of the support for a garage system. So it's steel beam sort of encased in concrete, which Mercer Island is very lucky to get. Apparently, it's the last artifact from 9/11 that's going to any fire station, and there have been hundreds around the country, and we're the last one. And apparently, many communities have applied and been turned down, but we got the okay for that. So anyway, artifact from 9/11 will be a part of the 1% for Art that goes in front of the fire station. And also the city has received a new sculpture. It's apparently, I haven't seen it, but it's a bronze, it's a dog, and it's going to be installed in the dog park sometime this fall. It's done by the artist Georgia Gerber, who did the rabbit in front of the library. So it's the same artist. It's going to be a dog. It's going to be great. And that's it.
Very good. Tom?
A couple of weeks ago, we had a Sound Cities Association meeting, and there were some very exciting topics like a number of discussions around solid waste. But what I wanted to mention is that we talked a lot about the transportation package and its lack of approval because, as the mayor mentioned, there are a lot of local transportation funding projects and hopes and wishes in that bill that did not pass. So we talked a lot about that, and there's going to be a meeting with Dow, Constantine, and other King County players about transportation package and what we might want in there or what we could revise. So if that is brought up again in a special session or next session. So that was great. And I also mentioned the renaming of the Aubrey Davis Park, or renaming of the lid to the Aubrey Davis Park, and people were, really excited to hear that, and there's lots of, big smiles and head noddings, and so that was really nice to be able to share that great news. The other bit that I'll just mention, I'm sure as a council we'll make a little bit bigger deal of it, but as reported in the patch, that William Ginn was awarded the Flash Family Inspiration Award, and I was very honored to nominate him and thrilled that that was such a wonderful thing that they chose him. So, great gentleman, congratulations, and I look forward to doing a bigger splash in the future.
Good. Mike? Had a great time at summer celebration. A lot of people there. It was a great turnout. The fireworks are past my bedtime, so I didn't get a chance to see those, but it seemed like everything really went well, at least certainly from my perspective. I didn't, and I heard nothing but positive things. I'd like to compliment the mayor on his talk about service to after the parade. It was just very well delivered and well done on that, Mr. Mayor.
You are much too kind. That was a tough gig. Lots of people running all over the place, and with lots of other things to do rather than listen to me. So the vets, though, were a wonderful audience, so that was good. We did the dedication of Aubrey Davis Park. That was a very nice thing, nice turnout of folks, and just a very pleasant event. The family was thrilled. Fred, Judy, and Alan were all there, so we had mayors spanning all sorts of years. So that was a good thing. Parade, Debbie and I held down the fort for the rest of you who were, Mike was there, but in a different capacity, but for the rest of you who were not there. Giving out the candy. We were a bit incognito. We had our shirts, but we were not announced as council, so we were really subservient to LEAP. LEAP was the big show, and we were just along for the candy passing out with LEAP there. So, had a Mayors of Lake Washington meeting this past week. Transportation bill and what happened in the legislature was a big part of that conversation as well. Economic growth and the fact that there is a National League of Cities meeting upcoming in the fall, and the fact that there is the ability to get, in November, reasonably priced tickets for a single day to that. So we'll need to talk more about that. Javier is looking for folks for a ribbon cutting. I will be gone at that point, so it's in August 14, I believe. So if you're around and willing to participate in that. And so I'd say I just observed driving up First Hill the other day, our deer aren't looking so good. And
Bruce says the staff are watering them like crazy. They're trying to do all they can to save them, but first summer and a couple of the deer are looking a little...
Yeah, not going to happen.
Yeah. So they're warranted, and so they...
Is there a way to quickly transplant them to a more hospitable place before they...
I don't know. I'll ask Bruce to see if there's a plan B.
Interestingly, the one that was knocked down some months ago is not...
Seems to be the one that's doing the best.
It's doing the best,
Well,
So it makes
we should be knocking down the other two.
Well, it makes me think they could be transplanted. I don't know.
Because I think rather than driving up 24th, it just gets sadder and sadder. If there's a chance to save them by relocating them, I would rather give them, one last
chance to live.
chance to live and to be enjoyed, because as brief as it's been, those deer have become such an icon to at least that part of the island.
I'm sure the children out there are, already happily in mourning.
A lot of adults are mourning too.
All right, if nothing else, we are adjourned. Thank you all.